Did you know that there are 49 different legends in Riftbound right now? Many of them I haven't played since they originally released, and several of them I've never tried at all. So today I wanted to go back and see just how long it would take me to win a game with every single legend. I will talk about what I liked and what I disliked about them, and keep track of just how many games it takes me to actually get a win going into the Vendetta meta. But 50 characters is quite a lot to get through, so let's not waste any time and just get right into it. Okay, so the original idea for this video was going to be showing every game I played, but that ended up being over 16 hours long, so we're not going to be doing that. Instead, I'm going to take some inspiration from MBT's 10-minute testings and just cover the cards in each deck, then cut up the footage as I tell you about the games. This was the shorter option, and it still came to like 70 pages of scripting, so hopefully you enjoy it, and if you do, let me know, and maybe when the next set comes out, I can stream the challenge live. Regardless, let's talk about Annie as we get into the Proving Grounds games.
You wanna play too? It'll be fun.
I mentioned this in the actual games, but Annie was actually the first legend that I took seriously, and I even brought her to the Houston Regionals in Set 1. But since then, the deck has taken a massive overhaul, with a huge focus on ambush units, and that's because of Annie's legend ability. She lets you ready 2 runes at the end of your turn, which means you can always drop in an Inferna, for example, if they use a spell to remove a unit that is holding a battlefield. Or you can quick draw in a longsword for a 2 might boost. In both cases, it's pretty helpful. If you have 3 energy up, Grim Apothecary allows you to save one of your units, or Rengar can be used to drop in a surprise assault unit into your base, which, of course, doesn't even get into the utility of spells like Hard Bargain, Flash, Ride the Wind, or Starcrossed. All the while, Traveling Merchant and Kaisa are getting you hand advantage, Vex is controlling the board, and big bunguses like Noxus Hopeful and Darius can just overwhelm the opponent, especially when paired with Cleave. In the game, I was paired into a Kennen, and I got to make some really solid tempo plays that put me a bit ahead. I had an overzealous fan at a battlefield, and they used Call the Weak, but because Annie untapped my runes, I had the resources to drop in an Inferna in response, which was able to be sacked instead of the fan, and that made the opponent overcommit with their Fizz to remove the unit. Following that, I accelerated my Kaisa into the Forbidding Wastes, which baited them into swinging into her, and a Ride the Wind allowed me to protect her and conquer the Amateur Recital battlefield, also snagging me a card draw in the process. And because they burned their removal, I got to trigger the Amateur Recital's ability and move Kaisa to base and swing her back over into the Waste with a Cleave for yet another card draw. This essentially in its own gave me enough resources and point advantage to win the game in just a few more turns. As is pretty clear, Annie gives you a lot of advantage and a ton of battle tricks that you can work with to get you out of just about any situation. She does struggle a little bit with board wipes, but when it comes to combat, there are very few legends that do it better.
In me, Wuju lives on.
Following Annie is Master Yi, a green and orange legend from the Proving Ground set, who gives your defending units 2 might if they are defending alone. So I haven't really played much Master Yi at this point. It's a deck that seems too straightforward and boring in my opinion. I really do like big interactions, and Yi is just kinda something that sits there a lot of the time. But that said, it is a very simple deck that is just super strong. The general game plan is to play a 2-drop and hold a battlefield with overwhelming stats, as well as having some combat tricks to support you. And man, does Yi have some good 2-drops. We were using the Lonely Poro and Scuttle Crab for some card draw, and the new Mournful Witness from Vendetta is a great option to round things out. Witness gets empowered and gains 2 might when she survives combat, making her a flat 4 might as a 2-drop, and going up to 6 when defending alone in this case. Outside of that though, the deck is just super oppressive. Combat tricks like On Guard, Discipline, Back Off, and Punch First help our already solid might boost from Yi to let us win just about any fight on the defense. Tools like Defy, Sabotage, and Zonias keep us protected, and brutal units like Rengar who can ambush to any occupied battlefield, or Ruin Runner who can't be targeted by opponent's spells or abilities, just make us extremely difficult to deal with. We also have the orange Ambessa in this deck, who is an absolute powerhouse. When empowered, she gets 3 might and can't be dealt damage outside of combat, so challenge effects are basically free removal for us. Not only that, but when she defends alone, she defends for 9 if you empower her in this deck, which is absolutely wild. In our game, we got paired into a Nasus, and because we went first, we were able to plant the Witness at the Grove of the Godwillow. They had passed their first turn in hopes of killing her with a Wages of Pain, but a Discipline lets her survive. The Grove netted us some card draw, and with that, we can hide a Zhonya's on the following turn and develop Ambessa as well. And on that note, wow, is the Witness good with Zhonya's. Basically, if they run in and do kill her in combat, you can flip Zhonya's, returning her to the base instead of letting her die. And because she has technically survived combat, you can empower her as well, which is crazy. What made it even better is that they actually needed to trade their blue Nasus to take her out to begin with, thanks to yet another discipline, so we kill their Nasus as well and empower our Witness in that turn. Now, I also mentioned Ambessa. I boost her up, charm in their Fey folk, and hold a challenge in hand, which would have been great if a Watcher didn't come down and ruin all the fun. In the end though, he pulls his units back, and when the same Watcher goes in to conquer later, I ambush in with Rengar, who, with Master Yi's boost, is big enough to win the fight. An On Guard outdoes Nasus's Stupefy, I conquer for my 7th point on their turn, and they have to pass it back, letting me hold for the game, bringing us to a total of 2 wins and 0 losses for the series so far, and surely we can keep this up. We are just getting started, and I can already see the light at the end of the tunnel. And speaking of light, Lux is famously a legend that I love to play, but who I am terrible with. And choosing to not play the infinite combo probably doesn't help with that. Lux is the blue and yellow legend for the Proving Ground set, who lets you draw a card whenever you cast a spell that costs 5 or more. And we have a lot of those. Progress Day becomes a draw 5 with her. Sprite Burst generates some readied board presence. Falling Comet, Singularity, and Unchecked Power are used for removal. And Promising Future actually lets you double dip, sorta. This card lets both players look at the top 5 cards of their deck and then play one of them without paying its energy cost. So if you use it, and then land on, let's say, a Progress Day, you get the 4 card draws from playing Progress Day, plus the legend trigger for both Promising Future and Progress Day, meaning you are netting a card draw of 6, or you can even consider it 7 if you are considering the fact that you are effectively removing Progress Day from your deck as well. It is just pretty good. Outside of that though, it's a pretty standard Vanguard Armory list for Lux. This is a gear that can be exhausted each turn to make 3 One Might Recruit tokens. And if you have Jayce, Man of Progress, you can actually cheat it out for basically half the cost by sacrificing any other gear. Gear like the gold tokens that we can produce with units like Honest Broker, Plundering Poro, or Wages of Pain. Or we can super abuse Sprite Fountain. This is a gear that makes a sprite when you play it as well as when it dies, and because it has temporary, that is usually the next turn. But if we play it, and then sacrifice it to Jayce to play an armory, we can make both sprites in the same turn, which is kinda neat. Finally, our only real new addition to this deck from Vendetta comes in the form of Bottled Constellation, though we also do use Heisho Shell of the World as a new battlefield. The former is a 10 energy gear that lets you sack 3 units or gear at the start of your turn to get a free point, while the latter is a battlefield that removes deflect costs when we're targeting units there. So it is a super fun deck, but it is kinda slow, which is actually fine because our first game was into a dazzling Aurora Jayce. But unfortunately, thanks to Mobilize and Plateworm Egg, Aurora comes down on turn 3, letting his Elder Dragon wipe out my Poro and my Lux. Luckily, we soon reach a salvage to kill the Aurora, but another one comes out pretty quickly afterwards. On top of that, with Sprite Fountain, he could establish a board pretty early, and Garbage Grabber means that he can just recycle Elder Dragons and keep getting free draws if I ever did remove them. In the end, I just couldn't keep up and we lose that game, but don't worry, our next game would be different, and just kidding, it's another Aurora, this time being led by Misfortune. It's pretty much the same story here, except unlike the first game, my draws are much weaker, and ultimately I get ran over again, unfortunately. That brings us to a series score of 2-2 as we go into Lux's 3rd game. This time we get paired into a Renata Glask, who happens to be on the Treasure Hoard battlefield. Luckily, they missed their first turn, which lets me conquer the Horde on turn 2 and make a gold. And I finally get the combo, sacrificing that gold with Jayce to drop the Vanguard Armory on my 2nd turn, essentially making them rage quit immediately and giving us our win for Lux. Now, how do I treat rage quits in this challenge? Well, basically I'm going to consider the context of the situation. If the deck does what it's meant to do and just gets a powerful combo turn very early on, then I'm going to consider it a win because that's what it's designed to make happen, right? However, if I play a Poro on turn 1, pass to them, and then they just disconnect, I haven't done anything, and I don't think that should be considered a win. So as long as there's some kind of gameplay going on, I'm going to be okay taking a win when the opponent leaves. It needs to have some kind of feeling earned though. Regardless, that brings us to our final Proving Grounds legend, Garen.
My heart and sword, always for Demacia.
Famously one of, if not the weakest legends in the game. You see, Garen has the ability that whenever you conquer with 4 or more units, you can draw 2 cards. This is simply too difficult to pull off in my opinion. So we are going to completely ignore it and instead focus on what he does have going for him. Garen is in surprisingly decent colors, being orange and yellow. So we are going for some forbidden jutsu, and we're trying to abuse one of Vendetta's newest battlefields, the Dragon Roost. This lets you pay 2 power whenever you play a dragon to play it directly to that battlefield. That's right, we are playing Dragon Garen. And we're doing this for a few reasons. First, dragons is actually an archetype that is something I have a ton of experience with in this game. I played Dragon Volibear in set 1 and 2 quite a bit, and the current deck that I've been using until the end of Unleashed was actually Dragon Rengar. So I'm hoping that I can transfer over some of those ideas to make this bad deck into a good one. And 2, I think it's just a strong core in general, though we are going to be avoiding the Aurora package this time to flesh out our early game a little bit more. So let's talk about our cards. In general, the name of the game is Ramp and Card Draw. For card draw, we have Sacrifice, which lets us, as the name suggests, sacrifice a mighty unit to draw 2 cards and channel a rune. We also have Show of Strength, which allows us to draw a card for every mighty unit we control. As for Ramp, Mobilize channels 1 rune, Catalyst of Aeons channels 2 runes, and we have Dragon Soul Sage, who can be exhausted to give us 1 energy. And then, absolutely crazy cards with Herald of Scales and Gentle Gem Dragon. Herald lowers the cost of our dragons by 2 energy to a minimum of 1, while Gem Dragon readies 2 runes whenever we play a dragon. And these abilities will stack, so if we have 2 of each, we are now getting a 4 energy discount and untapping 4 runes every time we play a dragon, which gets out of hand super quickly. Speaking of our dragons, we also have Direwing, who comes in ready if we control another dragon, Harness Dragon, who kills any unit on the board when you play it, Elder Dragon, who hits up to 1 enemy unit at every location, and makes it so that any damage your opponents take is lethal. And a new addition, Corrupted Dragon, who comes in ready if you aren't already close to winning the game, and pushes up to 5 might worth of units away when it attacks. And remember, any of those dragons can be played to Dragon Roost for just 2 power. Our game was into an infinite combo Lux, which made me a little bit nervous. It's not a deck I have a ton of experience playing into, and I know it can just win the game very quickly. I got to drop a Catalyst on turn 2, and they conquered the Roost on their next turn, which let me drop a Gentle Gem Dragon directly onto it. This meant that I conquered, untapped 2 energy, and suddenly had more resources available to sabotage and snipe their Singularity. And we had 1 floating energy available for a sacrifice if we needed it. With the Gem Dragon on 1 battlefield, the opponent sends a sprite to conquer the other, but on my turn, Direwing is active and comes in ready to clean it up. Yet again, this means I have 2 untapped energy and got to fire off yet another sabotage, this time removing their Time Warp. The following turn, I drew into another Gentle Gem Dragon, now untapping 4, and finally, on their turn, they commit to killing the Direwing with a pair of Crescent Strikes. I sacrificed before the second, drawing into an Elder Dragon, but I didn't even drop it before the game was over. Dragons remain to be the absolute best, and a surprisingly quick 6-minute win on Garen brings us to a total of 4 wins and 2 losses as we move into Origins. Okay, going through the Proving Ground sets, I think the Legends actually hold up surprisingly well. Master Yi is obviously one of the strongest Legends in the game. It's kind of idiot-proof. I play it pretty terribly, but just getting a ton of value for free, it turns out is great. Annie, similarly, I had a lot of fun on that deck. I wish I had been playing it more throughout the last few sets. It's just so aggressive. There's so many things you can do because of that legend ability. Being able to untap 2 at the end of your turn works really well with the ambush and reaction units. And then like ride the wind and all that stuff as well, right? You can play super greedy and you're not really going to get punished for it. As for Lux, if you're not playing like the infinite combo, it can be kind of rough depending on what you go into. I did run into a lot of Aurora, and I don't think I sided well into it. Unfortunately, that's pilot error 100%, but it is the only deck that I lost on of the Proving Grounds champions, so that's maybe something. I think I wanted to play something goofy with that deck as well, rather than play like an established list. probably on me, but there's going to be a couple decks through here that I just like the fun versions of more, and we're not doing this super competitively, so that's just going to have to be okay. As for Garen, I tested the Dragon version out and just out-tempoed the fuck out of that Lux. Super, super fun. Any Dragon deck I'm going to have a fun time on. We're going to have a Rengar list once we get to that set where I do like a Dragon Rengar, and we do that as well. I don't remember if I did Volibear like that, but we have a couple Dragon lists throughout the set, and it just is a consistent way to make Orange work if you don't want to go with Aurora. And if you do want to go with Aurora, it's going to work in that too, so plenty to work with there. Either way, let's get on to Spirit Forged.
I'll cherish these memories forever.
Now, of just about all of the other legends, I think Ahri has probably aged the worst. She is the blue and green legend for the set, and has the ability that whenever an enemy unit attacks into your units, they lose 1 might. However, old Riftbound design was of the belief that these minus effects shouldn't be allowed to hit 0. So like Stupefy and Thousand Tail Watcher, Ahri can only drop units to a minimum of 1, which is a bit rough. Now, as you might be imagining with that ability, Ahri is a very hold-based deck, kind of like a go-wide version of Master Yi. And we're actually going to be double dipping on that by playing the green Ahri, which scores an extra point when she holds. If that's not enough, we are also going to play Blue Sentinel, which doubles your hold triggers, and produces power when it holds, so you can hide cards and make more aggressive plays without falling behind on energy. And finally, Vilema, who lets you draw a card when she holds, who also has Ambush, and makes it so your opponent's units that are weaker than her don't do damage in showdowns with her. Of course, we're also on Grove of the Godwillow to draw a card when we hold there, so basically if we even hold once or twice, we should be able to win the game from the value that we generate. That said, if we can't get established on the board, it's going to be a very uphill battle, and we'll have to work around that. As far as cards from Vendetta go, we are only really adding Mournful Witness, who we talked about in the Master Yi section. We're also doing an Affectionate Poro though, who lets you draw a card if they survive a combat without taking damage. So we can use effects like Back Off to stun opponents to facilitate that, or Mutated Mouser, which has Tank to protect them. Wages of Pain to snipe attackers, or even Emperor's Divide to pull units away can also trigger his effect as well. Both of these new units kind of want to do the same thing, which is great, and if we have Vilema ambush in, it's pretty much guaranteed to get them both off. We could also add the blue Mel into this deck, as when she's empowered, she increases your minus effects to be 1 more powerful. So if anything attacks into us, they would drop by 2 might, and that's pretty good. However, the minimum of 1 requirement is still in effect, which can be pretty limiting. Even so, she is a fantastic option, and I think she deserves to be in the sideboard at the very least. Now, another cool unit here is the Chakram Dancer, who has Ambush and can drop in to give your units shield for the turn. And we should have access to the energy needed to play all of these cards thanks to Sona, who untaps 4 runes at the end of the turn if she is at a battlefield. Otherwise, we're using all of the normal blue and green stuff like Defy, Stupefy, and Discipline to round out our list. This was our first of many matchups into Zed in this video, and we have a quick fight over the Grove of the Godwillow on our second turn. But thanks to Wages of Pain, we come out on top, and our Witness gets empowered up to 4 might, which, with our Legend ability, gives us just enough to charm in their Noxus Hopeful to take it out. Unfortunately, we don't actually get the hold off, as a Ruthless Strike kills the Witness, and that means that he can conquer and hold the Grove, as we don't have any units out. Instead, we spend our turn developing another Witness and a Ravenbloom student. Luckily, on our next turn, a Stupefy lets us take Zon Warren's back with the Witness, empowering her, and casting a spell boosts up Ravenbloom as well, which lets him take the Grove back, ultimately being supported by Sona at the end of the turn, who untaps our runes. Zed develops a bit, then sends a Zed unit into trade with the Mournful Witness, but as is often the case, a well-timed Discipline lets us win the fight and hold to 5. This also allows us to steal a card draw with the Grove, putting us even further ahead. The following turn has me dropping yet another Sona and a Mutated Mouser, protecting them with Tank, and the opponent isn't really able to do much other than conquer the other battlefield and pray for a good draw. He doesn't really get one, and I hold to 6, dropping in a blue Sentinel and a green Ahri there, threatening to hold for game. Unfortunately though, he never passes back to me, but fortunately that is because he leaves the game. Honestly, the deck felt surprisingly solid, though I do think my opponent just had some pretty unlucky draws. With that said, we are 5-2 going into Darius.
They will regret opposing me.
Darius is kind of the forgotten middle child of the Origin set. He has the Legion ability to tap him for an energy, and honestly, that's pretty great. But he's often kind of held back by his colors. Red and yellow is kind of all gas and no brakes, and if you aren't completely rolling over the opponent, then you'll run out of resources and the deck falls apart. There is a pretty significant lack of card draw, so the excess energy doesn't really have a place to go, which is why the deck is often paired with Baited Hook, a gear that lets you sacrifice a unit while paying 1 energy and a power to look through the top 5 cards of your deck for any unit that has at most 1 more might than the one you killed. Then you can play that unit for free. Now, I got a bit funky with this deck, I'm going to be honest. I was inspired by LeBlanc, which is kind of fitting for Darius, I guess. And as such, I focused around Karthus when I saw this adorable guy from the Vendetta set. You see, Karthus doubles your death knells, which both Baited Hook and Sacrifice already facilitate, but this new card, Escape Greyback, also lets you kill a unit to empower him. So we can trigger a death knell ability, have a 5 might beater, and then sacrifice him to Baited Hook for any unit in the deck, which is a kind of cool cycle. Our other units include Soaring Scout and Black Rose Dignitary, both of whom channel a rune when they die, Honest Broker, who makes a gold when she dies, Noxian Emissary, who makes 2 1-might recruits when he dies if he's empowered, Loyal Poro, who can draw us a card if he doesn't die alone, Glask Mixologist, who can revive any of our smaller units, and it's just now occurring to me that I probably could have used Spectral Matron in the deck and made it a purely yellow list, but I did go with the Ferris Forerunner instead, who can make 2 3-might mech tokens. Honestly, either way is pretty solid, especially if you have Karthus out. Importantly, Karthus adds an extra death knell effect and does not give you a second effect, basically meaning that he stacks so that if you have 3 Karthus out when a Forerunner dies, for example, you are making a total of 8 mechs altogether. Now, our spells all kill our own units as well. Sacrifice we have talked about. Hidden Blade can be hidden and kill a unit at a battlefield to have its owner draw 2 cards. Call the Weak makes each player sacrifice 1 unit, and Shadow Call makes a friendly unit temporary before drawing 2 cards. Which, like, we want the units to die anyways, or we can just sacrifice the temporary unit to Baited Hook, so it is just free real estate. We get paired into yet another Vendetta legend with Shen, and ignore the timer, I did not reset it after Ahri because I'm not good at being a YouTuber. So, both battlefields boost units this game, with Treferian Warcamp giving 1 might to all units there, while Kinku Temple gives 1 might to all tanks there, which is pretty good for Shen, who can make any of his units into a tank whenever he wants. Anyway, we unfortunately miss our 2-drop, which lets him develop a bit and get ahead while we try to catch up. Lucky for us, they completely skip their 3rd turn without playing anything, which means we can swing in with Ferris Forerunner and hopefully trade evenly with both his Poro and his Witness. Now, I think they might have been a new player though, which I do feel kind of bad about, because they try to ambush in their Vi to stun the Forerunner. But that doesn't work as they're not the attacker, so we trade with Vi being their last unit there, until I call the Weak. He has the Defy to block that, but my chosen champion Darius gets to come in here. Darius gets readied and gets a 2 might boost when I play my 2nd card for the turn, which he happens to be, meaning I can use him to run over the Vi. The opponent drops a Fey Folk on his turn and I pull mine away, while also empowering an Emissary and sacrificing him to empower a Greyback. On his turn, my opponent conquers the Warcamp and drops in his Shen before charming in Darius with Shen's signature spell. But I drop a sacrifice and get some resources out of it at the very least. Back to me and I make a huge push, boosting all of my units thanks to the battlefield and winning out 16 to his 13. He does get the draw and channel from the Fey Folk dying, and I finally get both Karthus and Baited Hook into play. And with that, I conquer the battlefield and my opponent doesn't have the tools to take them back, leaving me with the win. Darius actually felt fantastic, despite me forgetting to use the legend ability even a single time throughout the game. Admittedly though, the Vi misplay definitely was a huge difference maker, and it could have been a very, very different game without it. Either way, we go to 6-2 as we head into Jinx.
Rules are made to be broken. Like buildings. Or people.
Now you might be saying, wow, you are doing so well, 6-2 is awesome. Surely you won't play a meme version of Jinx and ruin that amazing record. So anyways, we went all in on the Vendetta trash synergy in this Jinx deck. Jinx is a red and purple legend who allows you to draw a card if you reach your beginning phase and only have one card or less in your hand. So ideally, you want to rush the board or discard stuff to get that effect going. And we went with the discard route in this deck, even playing the purple Jinx as our chosen champion. She readies herself and gets 1 might whenever we discard, which can be surprisingly powerful and pretty consistent as well, especially with the new tools we got in Vendetta. This set introduced 3 really cool cards. Firstly, Consuming Curse, a 2 energy action speed spell that deals 2 damage and gets 1 more damage for each copy of it in your trash, which is kind of fun. We also have 2 new 5-drops, being Shadow Assassin, who gets to come in ready if you have another copy of her in your trash, and Shadow Cloaked Lurker, who gets a 2 energy discount per copy of him in your trash. That's not all though. Older cards also benefit from being sent to the trash. Flame Chompers can be played for a power when it's discarded. Undying Legion and Immortal Phoenix can be played from the trash if you meet certain conditions. Last Rites and Heedless Resurrection both allow you to revive units from your trash, and Rasa gets a discount for each card in your trash. We even threw in a red Reksai, who gives any unit played from anywhere other than your hand the Accelerate effect. As for our discard enablers, Punching Poro can discard to empower himself. Traveling Merchant discards and draws a card when you move him, which is the same effect that Zon Warren's has when you conquer it. Ruthless Strike allows you to discard a card to deal extra direct damage, and Super Mega Death Rocket discards when you conquer to return itself to your hand from the trash. Finally, when Zed from the Shadows conquers, you can make a Shadow Clone, which lets you banish units from your trash to gain Assault 4 for the turn. This card did not feel great. I would probably replace this for something else if I went through this challenge again. Although that's kind of the case for the whole deck. I don't think this is a good deck, but I did think it looked fun and I wanted to try it out. So anyways, I get absolutely dumpstered 3 games in a row. From 2 Kennens and a Kai'Sa, with the Kennens just outvaluing me pretty hard with essentially just better versions of my own deck, and against Kai'Sa, I kept making sequencing mistakes in the early game which were punished really, really badly. Their removal spells just left me without any resources and I just couldn't keep up. Entirely my fault though, and I definitely could have piloted it better. But that brings us to our 4th game, which was into Mel. They had an early lead, setting up a Ravenbloom student and a Vex at a battlefield, both of which were Zon Warrens in this game, by the way. I end up discarding a Shadow Assassin to a Ruthless Strike, killing the Vex and running over the student with a Reksai to get back into the game, which is immediately stopped when they drop their purple Mel and empower her to banish the Reksai. I do some empowering of my own though, and on my turn I discard and play a Flame Chompers to empower a Punching Poro and develop a Zed as well. They keep the trend going by dropping and empowering an Applied Researcher, which discounts their spells and is a pretty big problem. When I get back to my turn, I can finally play my Jinx champion, forgetting to activate my Jinx legend because I am just terrible at this game. In actuality though, I just got excited by my turn. It happens very often for me for some reason. I will zero in on a play that I'm going to make at the start of my turn and overlook things like battlefield triggers or legend effects. It's something I'm cognizant of and I need to work on. Anyways, I use Zon Warrens to discard an Endless Legion, readying and boosting up Jinx to send her into a battlefield alongside Zed and his Shadow, and even with a Shock Blast from hand, I managed to overrun her units and gain control of the board. Mel drops a Watcher to take it back, and I actually remember to draw for Jinx for once as I develop into my base. I pass back to them and another Researcher comes out, and on my turn, I use a Consuming Curse to pop their student. However, Mel's signature spell is used to redirect that spell to kill my merchant. Luckily, just like the student, my next Consuming Curse also gets boosted, and this time I do take it out. With that, I send in the Lurker and a Shadow Clone, only for the clone to get gusted away. This leaves me with nothing, but I do get to use Undying Legion to revive itself. The opponent posts up at both battlefields and they go to 6 and hide a card with the Watcher. So I strap a Last Rite onto the Legion and swing in, just for the hidden card Temporal Breach to replay the Watcher and lower my might. Luckily, I still had a Ruthless Strike in hand, discarding and playing a Flame Chompers to conquer and triggering Zon to get a free draw. Thanks to conquering with Last Rites, I also get to replay a Traveling Merchant from the trash, and the opponent draws into nothing, finally giving us the win and putting us to a record of 7-6. This was rough, but it was my own fault for both being a terrible player into Kai'Sa and trying to play a meme deck for this challenge.
I've been to the void and back. You're nothing.
That brings us to Kai'Sa, who was actually the first deck I ever built for Riftbound, and I played her until eventually swapping to Annie for Houston, and despite loving the deck, I really haven't played her much since then. Kai'Sa is the blue and red legend in Origins, and has the very powerful ability that she can be exhausted to supply a power for a spell. This means that playing incredibly powerful spells doesn't slow you down at all. Remember, these cards are designed with the trade-off of losing runes to play them, and you don't have to worry about that. For our deck, this means that Hextech Ray, Shock Blast, Void Seeker, and Progress Day will not have a power cost to them. Bellows Breath can have up to 1 if you repeat it, and Falling Star and Singularity have 1 as well. All of these spells are basically just damaging spot removal, with the exception of Progress Day, which is card draw, but we've already talked about that. Otherwise, the only other spells that we have are Stupefy and Time Warp, one which weakens their units, and the other takes an extra turn. Now, we are adding one spell from Vendetta though, and I think it is absolutely bonkers in Kai'Sa. Perfect execution for 3 energy and a power, or in this case, no power. You can give a unit Assault 3 and ready it. And this card has flow, so it can also be cast from your trash. Like, this is such a scary card in this deck, I absolutely love it. As for our units, Plundering Poro makes gold when it conquers, Watchful Sentry draws a card when it dies, and Lecturing Yordle draws a card when he enters. Applied Researcher can make your spells even cheaper and potentially help us abuse Time Warp. Ferris Forerunner makes tokens when it dies, and Thousand Tail Watcher has Accelerate and lowers all opponents' units' might by 3 when you play it. And if all of that wasn't strong enough, Kai'Sa also has one of the best champion units in the game with Kai'Sa Survivor, a 4-might unit with Accelerate, which draws a card whenever she conquers. All in all, this deck is scary. Tons of removal, tons of card draw, and access to quite a few accelerating units to get on board quickly. We get a really awesome matchup being paired into a Diana, and we have a quick back and forth over the Ravenbloom Conservatory until on my 3rd turn I use a Bellows Breath to kill his backline before developing a Kai'Sa. They go into hiding on their turn and develop a Researcher, while on my turn I conquer the Conservatory with Kai'Sa, drawing into a Progress Day, which draws me another 4 more cards. Or it would if they didn't have a hard bargain, which is pretty rough. They then play a Wages of Pain twice thanks to Fizz, killing my Kai'Sa and taking back the battlefield. At this point, I'm pretty tired of the Diana, so I use Singularity to kill her and the Researcher, but ultimately they clear my board with a Moonfall and then drop a Baron on me, which is brutal, so I just can't get over it. Game 2 brings us into a Rumble matchup, making it blue and red versus blue and red. I'm off to a great start, conquering the treasure hoard with a Plundering Poro for 2 gold, and when he takes it back, I return the favor with Kai'Sa. Then he does something I am not expecting at all, with dropping an Ornn and attaching a Hexplate to it to make it a mech. This is a very scary unit with Deflect 2, and he gets a might for each gear that he controls. I cannot currently touch it, so I pull back and set up an Empowered Researcher. On his turn, he drops Rumble and uses a Deadly Flourish to kill one of my units and make a gold, as well as conquering the treasure hoard to make another, bumping Ornn up to a total of 10. He even uses an Assembly Rig to make another mech token, which is starting to get out of hand for me. So I use a Stupefy and a Falling Star to clear out his backline, and it's all about holding the fort and avoiding the Ornn for now, which would have been easier if he didn't Void Seeker my Kai'Sa. Luckily, we have a Watcher in hand, so I drop him in Accelerated and use Falling Star to hit the Ornn, at which point my opponent surrenders and we take the win.
My sight may be gone, but my vision holds true.
Alright, so you might not believe this if I tell you it, but Lee Sin was actually a terror in our local scene in Set 1. But yet again, it is a deck that I haven't really played around with much myself, and worse yet, there are exactly 0 new cards in this new set that give or interact with buffs at all, which is kinda lame. And speaking of which, Lee Sin is the orange and green legend from the Origin set, who can be exhausted for 1 energy to buff one of your units. It is a super simple ability that just makes your cards a little bit more resilient, and his champion, Lee Sin Centered, has Accelerate and boosts all other buffed units at his battlefield by 2 might, so that does help quite a bit. So we're just basically working around the idea of building a deck with cards that like to have a little bit more board presence, and as a result, we are running 10 2-drops to make sure we always have something to work with. These include Mutated Mauser and Scuttlecrab, as well as Pit Rookie and Mournful Witness. Outside of those, we have a few familiar faces. First Mate, Sona, and Ruin Runner have all come up earlier, and Sett Brawler is here as well. This is a unit that is buffed when it enters and when he conquers, and he can spend his own buff to get a 4 might boost. This is particularly good in Lee Sin, as you can spend his normal buff, then buff him again with your legend, and spend that new buff for an 8 might boost increase total. And finally, Jayce Hammer in Hand is a 5 might unit that gets an added benefit whenever he is readied, either being ganking, assault 2, or deflect 2 for the rest of the turn. As for spells, I mean, it's kind of a hybrid of what we had for Ahri and Master Yi. Defy and the new Crumbling Sand to deal with opponents' spells, and Charm and Challenge to deal with their units. We have pump spells in Punch First, Discipline, and Feral Strength, which is a 2 energy spell that can be repeated to give 2 might. And on the defensive, we have Emperor's Divide and Back Off. Like I said, it is a combat version of Ahri almost, and it feels okay. Starting out our match into Reksai, and we get an early board going with Mournful Witness. I want to avoid him getting value out of his grayback, so I use Discipline and Charm to kill it and empower the Witness. He sets up a few more units, and I develop and buff a Jayce, pulling my Witness back to keep her safe. My opponent obviously goes in for the Conquer with a Reksai proc and pulls out a Legion Rearguard, accelerating it to the other battlefield before sacrificing it to the Greyback and dropping a Carrion Dredger and yet another Noxus Hopeful. Jayce readies and gets Assault, easily swinging over the Greyback and letting me draw with the Monastery. From here, I develop a Sett and hide a Back Off before conquering the other battlefield and passing back to them. She naturally kills the Witness and triggers Reksai, finding a Void Rush, which itself finds an Honest Broker and another Void Rush. She goes all in, double blood rushing a Hopeful and sending it into Jayce, only for it to get stunned and pushed back. He tries to get some more tempo by playing yet another Void Rush, but a Defy stops that, which unfortunately lets him call the weak unobstructed, forcing me to kill my Sett so that he can't conquer the Monastery. When Jayce readies, he gets ganking and I move him to the waist before using First Mate to move him back to safety. Back to my opponent, and the third Void Rush reveals an Under Titan and an Inferna. And with that, they conquer both battlefields and stack up on the wastes. So Jayce gets Assault this time and swings in with a buff from Lee Sin and a Punch First to just break into his battlefield, which is a play that somehow I don't see. So instead I push the First Mate into the Monastery, use it to draw, and then find a Charm and push his Hopeful away. Then a Punch First allows me to punch over his units and win the game, essentially taking the long route for what would have been a pretty straightforward path. Honestly, Lee surprisingly feels pretty good overall. It turns out orange and green are just super powerful colors together, and even if we don't have buff-specific cards, we are getting more units, which want to be buffed, and that gets you a lot of value in itself. Just like that, we go up to 9 and 7.
The dawn has arrived.
Now, if there was one legend that I wish I played more in the previous sets, it is Leona. This time we are in green and yellow. Leona allows you to buff a unit whenever you stun something, and there is a lot of cool stun support, especially in the last few sets. The yellow Kennen, Leona, and Vi can all stun when they attack, and both Kennen and Nami can stun when you play them. Then of course we have Back Off and Leona's signature spell, Zenith Blade, to stun with spells. Finally, the green Vex has the ability to move to any battlefield where you stun an enemy unit. This is kind of like a super janky Ride the Wind, but it's just as powerful. As for other units, we also have the Crab, the Broker, and once again, Sona. Spells are also looking pretty familiar with Sacrifice, Charm, Defy, and Discipline, but we are also adding in Call to Glory, which gives 3 might for 3 energy, or it allows you to play it completely for free by spending a buff. Then we have Tactical Retreat, which is basically the spell version of Zhonya's, and this is a fantastic option in our deck because we have so many units with attack triggers. So saving them, returning them to base, and giving them the opportunity to attack again is honestly usually pretty advantageous to us. Finally, to wrap things up, we have the green Leona, a big end finisher that lowers the might of stunned units by 8 and comes in ready if your opponent is close to winning the game. With that in mind, we are into a Kennen this time. We conquer the minefield and burn a Kennen of our own as well as a Charm, which is a bit rough. Then support our Crab with a Fish Girl before hiding a Back Off. Luckily, our opponent takes the bait and swings in. We stun them and buff Nami, so he just Hidden Blades his own unit to kill it and get some draw out of it. Notably, he does so without giving me the chance to defy it, but that's life, I guess, online. So he sets up a Kennen and a Frog in base and passes back to me. Also, watching this back, and he 100% cheated on that turn, only spending 1 energy for that hidden blade and floating an energy as well afterwards, effectively meaning he had 7 energy to spend that turn when he should have only had 5. But my dumbass misses it, as trying to narrate my thoughts throughout the game really cuts into my attention. Again, not a great YouTuber. It's fine though, I cheat later on, so we'll call it even. Anyways, I pull my dudes back and drop a Leona, and they develop into an Alawi while conquering the minefield. I'm able to take it back with Leona on my turn, stunning his Frogman and buffing my Crabman. Unfortunately, when I burn 2, this time I lose a Zhonya's and another back off. With that, I send Nami and the Crab back to the monastery, spending the Crab's buff to get a draw, and play yet another Crab and a Broker, and get us into having just an absolutely nuts hand going on. We have 2 Call to Glories, a Defy, and a Sacrifice. It is beautiful. He goes for an all-out swing and stuns Nami with Kennen, and I spend Nami's buff with a Call to Glory to trade with his Alawi. At least that was the plan. A Winds and Gusts bounces the Broker back to hand, and he develops a Vanguard Captain, as well as some recruits in base. My turn comes around, and I send the Scuttle in, adding in a stun from the ambushing Vi. I spend Leona's buff to play Call for Glory, and oops, I'm the cheater now. Honestly, I'm not too familiar with how this card works at this point, and my opponent should have had his Alawi marked for 8 might rather than 6 because of the boost he gets from all tokens, not just tentacles. It kind of sucks, but I guess we're going to call it even for earlier. But basically, he should have had 2 more might at this battlefield than we played with, which is just our bad. His turn comes around, he continues playing cards without checking for interaction, ultimately playing the Kennen signature spell and repeating it with Fizz. He then flows out some tentacles and develops onto the battlefield. My turn now, and I'm pretty easily able to conquer the monastery for a draw and manage to take the minefield as well. Not much else we can do for now, and they quickly take the minefield back on their turn. Luckily, as they go in to kill the Leona at the other battlefield, I save her with a tactical retreat, but unluckily they spawn a billion tentacles before passing back to me. Finally, I drop a Vex and move both Leona and Vi into the battlefield, stunning 2 of their units and pulling Vex in after them. They quit out here, but I was also going to drop a Nami from hand and stun their Vanguard Captain to conquer that battlefield as well with Vex, which would have won me the game if they didn't leave. Regardless, a quick win with Leona in just 1 game, bringing us to a total of 10-6. This was a really cool deck I definitely want to play more of, but I can absolutely feel that it falls short quite a bit and is pretty limited in the options it actually has.
Fortune doesn't favor fools.
Following Leona, and we have one of my favorite legends in Origins, who has kind of been relegated to just being Aurora. That is Miss Fortune, a purple and orange legend who can be exhausted to give a unit ganking. Normally that's kind of overlooked so that you can just power draw through your deck, but not today. I wanted to make a cool Miss Fortune deck, so instead we are super focusing in on combat, and kind of fitting thematically, we're going to be building around Gangplank. This is a 6 energy unit that can be empowered for 2 orange power, and once he is, any attempt to stun him, lower his might, or bounce him back to hand will result in him getting 3 might for the turn instead. Importantly, that isn't just your opponent's abilities, it includes your own too, and that's where the spice comes in. So, the list can be used to either lower your opponent's cards by 2 might, or boost your Gangplank by 3. Pack of Wonders can either bounce a functional card like Treasure Trove back to hand, or boost your Gangplank by 3. Starcrossed can now bounce your opponent's unit back to hand, and give your Gangplank 3 might. Jagged Cutlass also prevents him from being moved by opponent's spells like Charm or their irresistible Fey Folks, which just helps to keep him safe, as the only real way to remove him at this point is to deal with him through combat or through direct damaging spells. It is such a fun deck when it works. I even brought this to a Nexus Knight recently, and it tore through the opponents. It was awesome. Basically, you have a million ways to make him into a monster, and your opponent can only really deal with him with direct damage, and that's pretty limited depending on who you're playing against. Alternatively, you can also use all these tools to help Jayce win fights. And by using your legend to give these 2 ganking, you can really pull ahead. Outside of that, we just have resource tools. Traveling Merchant to cycle, Treasure Hunter to make gold, Tide Turner to swap places with any other unit or to be hidden for some shenanigans, First Mate to ready your stuff, Fizz to recycle your spells, Stack Deck to find cards, Treasure Trove to ramp and draw, Gust Monk, Guttural Roar, and Punch First to boost your dudes, and when all else fails, we simply drop a Baron on them. This is such a fun deck, easily one of my favorites of the entire video, and I cannot recommend trying it out enough. Anyways, we are playing into a Renekton, and to get things started, we drop a Treasure Hunter while he starts off with a Mobilize. That's right, we somehow found an Aurora Renekton, which is lame as hell. Our second turn is pretty massive. We move a Treasure Hunter to Vilema's lair, and then use First Mate and Misfortune to ready her and give her ganking. This allows us to conquer both battlefields and nets us 2 gold. They use their Renekton legend to recycle 2 runes and play out a Gentle Gem Dragon, readying 2 runes after that, and slowly winning me over by playing one of my favorite cards. Turn 3, we use Misfortune to give Treasure Hunter ganking again and again make a treasure while scoring to 4, as well as hopefully baiting their dragon to that battlefield. Then I drop Gangplank and choose to not empower him to keep the gold available for the following turn. Passing back, and my opponent plays a Seal before using Renekton to get Kha'Zix out, drawing 2 cards, and untapping 2 thanks to the Gem Dragon as well. We do get him to move into Vilema's lair, and then on our turn we drop the list and target Bilgewater units, allowing Gangplank to easily run over the Gem Dragon once we empower him. We follow this up by readying Gangplank with our First Mate, giving him ganking with Misfortune, and moving him over to the Star Spring, where we conquer for 6 and have Traveling Merchant push him back to safety with the battlefield. Kha'Zix then goes in to kill the Merchant, and unfortunately a Falling Star does kill Gangplank, but even so, First Mate goes in to conquer Vilema's lair and bring me to 7 on my turn, and I accelerate Misfortune Captain out onto the battlefield, equipping her with the Cutlass and bringing her to 7 might, playing Punch first and boosting her to 12, which takes the win. This brings our record to a total of 11 and 6. Again, this is a phenomenal deck that I cannot recommend enough.
The cracking of bones is the clinking of coins.
Up next, we have Sett, our yellow and orange legend for Origins. Like Lee Sin, Sett is a buff-based legend, which notably is a mechanic that had no real additions as Sett, and largely that means there are not new cards for the Sett deck. However, we do have one, so let's talk about what we're looking at. Sett's ability is that if a unit with a buff on it dies, he can exhaust himself and pay power to keep them alive while removing their buff. It is basically Zhonya's in the Legend Zone, and in general, we have a couple ways to buff our units. Firstly, play Pit Rookie. This just puts a buff right onto any of our other units, which is pretty solid. Second, we can play Fey Dragon. This buffs 4 of our units when it enters, and lets us make a gold whenever we spend a buff, essentially making Sett's legend ability pay for itself going forward. Third, we have Sett's signature spell, Showstopper, which lets you buff a unit in your base and then move it to a battlefield. And finally, the big one, Arena Bar, a gear that lets you exhaust it to put a buff on an exhausted unit. And remember, all units enter the board exhausted unless they are readied by another effect, so you can play anything, then buff it with the Arena Bar. There is also technically Cytherea, but she only buffs herself. Aside from that, we have plenty of yellow and orange staples that we've talked about. Punch First, Hidden Blade, Challenge, Call to Glory, which again, can be played for free by spending a buff. And we also have Repulse, which counters spells that target a single friendly unit at a battlefield. As for our other units, we have Irresistible Feyfolk, which can charm a unit when she moves into a battlefield, First Mate, and a few that we haven't mentioned yet in this video. Kinku Monk draws a card when it enters if you have 5 or more might on your board amongst your other units. Fiora is a 4 might unit that gets bonus effects when she becomes mighty, or if she has a buff on her in this case, and these include getting shield, deflect, and ganking. We also have Sett's champion, Sett Kingpin, who has tank and gets 1 might for each friendly buffed unit at his battlefield. Basically, he's just a big ol' idiot who protects your units. And finally, our Vendetta edition is Kayle, one of my favorite units for the new set. Kayle is a 3 might unit that can be empowered for 3 energy to get 2 might. However, she can be empowered up to 3 times, and at maximum stacks, she gets deflect 3 and ganking. So you can throw a buff on her and she's suddenly a 10 might unit with deflect 3 and ganking that can dodge death thanks to Sett, which is super cool. Our Sett deck gets paired into Renekton, who starts out by using his legend to get an early Herald of the Scales. I set up with an Arena Bar and pass back to them. Once he conquers the monastery, he drops a Raging Firebrand, which gives him a 5 energy discount on his next spell, which he uses to cast Confront and draw a card. Back to me, and we develop a Fiora who we quickly slap a buff onto. He taps out into yet another Herald and pulls his units to safety, and I get some card draw going for myself. First with Kinku Initiate, and then using the Monastery. And with the rest of our turn, we just drop a Sett, knowing that we can save our Fiora with our legend if needed. Luckily, they basically skipped their turn just playing a steal and passing back to me, which is crazy because they have an effective 8 energy available to play dragons. With that though, we gank over for a point with Fiora and use challenge to clear out a herald, knowing that they're already struggling to develop cards and this will probably set them back further. We also push Sett forward so that we can buff him, though I probably should have used the Fade Dragon to do that. Once again, they pass and we hold to 5 so we can pull our units back and drop a Kale, empowering her once and putting a buff on her. Unfortunately, we don't get to see her do much though, as the opponent gives up here and we go to a record of 12-6. Kind of upsetting. I do wish we could have played this deck a little bit more.
Size doesn't mean everything.
Like Ahri, Teemo is a deck that I want to love. I'm just so bad at it, and I don't know why. Teemo is in the blue and purple domains, again, 2 of my favorite colors, and it's all about hiding cards, allowing you to hide them for 1 energy rather than paying a power. He also has an ability to add a Teemo from the field or legend zone back to your hand with 1 energy, though that doesn't come up in our games. There are many great hidden cards to take advantage of in this deck, however, I wanted to test out the new one from Vendetta, Spiderling. A 3 energy 1 might unit that can be hidden and gains 1 might for each other Spiderling at its location. And to supplement that, you can actually play any number of Spiderlings in your deck, and so we choose to play with a casual 12. This actually works great with the blue Teemo as well. When he defends, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and you can deal 1 damage for each hidden card revealed this way. And since most of your deck is either Spiderlings who have hidden or other hidden cards, you're likely to deal about 4 damage on average in this list. In fact, only 13 cards in the entire deck aren't hits here, which is pretty crazy. That said, we can also find Nocturne with this effect as well. When Nocturne is seen when looking through the top of your deck, you can pay a power to play him immediately, which can be kind of massive. So rounding out our hidden cards, we have Evelynn, who can charm a unit when you flip her up on your turn, Bone Skewer, who can pull a unit from your opponent's hand directly into your battlefield, Switcheroo, which swaps the might of 2 units at a battlefield, and Consult the Past, which draws 2 cards. Any of these can also be returned to your hand from the trash and then hidden for free thanks to Teemo's signature spell, Guerrilla Warfare. We do have a few general support cards as well. Abandon is a counterspell that returns a spell being cast to its owner's hand and predicts to give us another chance of seeing Nocturne. Sprite Fountain can make a readied sprite, meaning we can rush in on our first turn and then hide a card immediately. Chakram Dancer has Ambush and gives your units their shield for the turn. Watcher is a great finishing option, as we've talked about already, and Baron Nashor spawns onto the battlefield and boosts all of your other units by 2, which is pretty good when we're trying to force down as many spiders as we can. And finally, Bottled Constellation lets us sack units to score a point at the very end of the game, which could be make or break. Is this optimal? No. Is it a bunch of spiders? Absolutely. And that's what we're going for. Teemo is paired into a Pike who goes first, and on our first turn we manage to use a Sprite Fountain to conquer the Bandle Tree. This is a special battlefield that allows you to hide 2 cards there. We hide a Teemo and an Evelynn and then pass back to them. Meanwhile, Pike makes a bunch of resources. Moving Treasure Hunter generates them a gold, and then using his legend and the battlefield Ripper's Bay, he returns the Treasure Hunter to hand, makes another gold, and channels a rune before dropping the unit right back onto the field. On my turn, I flip Teemo and Eve charming in the Hunter, killing it with Teemo and hitting a Nocturne as well. With that, we hide 2 spiders and conquer Ripper's Bay with our last sprite. I am feeling great here until a few turns later when he gets Bewitching Sprite out with a Pack of Wonders. This combo keeps making me discard cards on repeat, and when a Noxus Hopeful boosted by a Cleave rips through my whole battlefield, I'm left with just about nothing. And soon, we lose the game as a result. Game 2 is into Rumble, and unfortunately the only 2-drop we had was Teemo, who we couldn't play because we started with 2 purple runes. So following that, we just play some spiders in base until I think that we're big enough to cause a problem. Unfortunately, he plays Endless Riches, a new card that banishes his hand and trash and then skips his draw phase going forward. In exchange, he gets to burn 7 cards and can play any card from his trash, basically giving him a fresh hand of 7. And if he can hold his battlefield, he will burn 3 cards each turn, essentially meaning he gets 3 free card draws every turn. He pulls out of the battlefield and we post up our spiders at the Grove of the Godwillow before playing another spider in base. Now, the opponent draws for turn when they shouldn't, and even when I mention it, they don't fix that, so they just end up completely ignoring the negative side of Endless Riches several times throughout the game. I'm going to try to stop them as often as they can, and sometimes they listen, but many turns they just don't, which is a little bit frustrating. Regardless, I just deal with the cheating and play the game as best we can. They bring back a Sun Disk and then use Rumble's Conquer effect to revive a Ferris Forerunner, accelerating it with that Sun Disk. I ambush in Chakram Dancer and make it so that they can only kill one spider with it, which is pretty huge. On my turn, I miss my Grove trigger, admittedly because I'm a little bit in my head from them getting their draw phase, and then not responding to me trying to fix that. But eventually I use Switcheroo to kill his Rumble with a spider and then abandon his Shakedown back to hand. Then we hide a Teemo at each battlefield and drop another spider as well. On his turn, he attacks into my spider and I flip a Teemo, dealing 2 damage and letting us play yet another Nocturne to win the combat. However, he follows it up with another attack shortly afterwards. He develops a Seal and a Battering Ram and then swings it into the other battlefield, letting me trigger yet another Teemo. Somehow only hitting one hidden card, which is unbelievably unlikely. When he passes it back on my turn, I use Guerrilla Warfare to return a Teemo and Consult the Past to my hand, and hard cast the Consult, drawing into another copy and playing a spider before hiding the Consult. Their burden for turn gives them a Detonate, which lets them refill their hand by sacking a Seal, and then they just pass back. I, believe it or not, play more spiders, then hide an Evelynn. They are ahead by a point at this time, but at least we have 36 might worth of spiders, I guess. That's something. They get access to even more mechs and build up their battlefield with units, and on my turn I play another spider, bringing us up to 7 of them. Then charm in their Plaza Guardian, which does get to kill off one of my 8-legged friends. I drop a Teemo and play a Bone Skewer to scout out their hand, seeing 2 Shakedowns and a Longsword. With that, I hide Evelynn, and then pull all of my spiders back to base to ready an attack the following turn. He holds to 7 and stupefies and detonates, giving him a ton of card draw. He then uses the Sun Disk to accelerate in yet another Battering Ram, and our Teemo finds 2 Nocturnes and deals 2 damage. He tries to use Shakedown to kill a Nocturne, but I just let him draw cards instead. He uses the second Shakedown, but I do the same, and with no way to kill my units, and knowing that I have an army of creepy crawlies ready to swing in on my turn, he gives up and we take the win, going 1-1 with Teemo, bringing us to a grand total of 13-7.
Join the glorious evolution.
With that, we are back on some meme bullshit with Viktor. Viktor is the blue and yellow legend for Origins and allows you to pay 1 energy to exhaust your legend and create a 1 might recruit. It is surprisingly powerful as a resource engine that your opponents can't really get rid of because it's part of your legend. I wanted to build this deck around the new gears Hextech Formula and Glowstone. Hextech Formula can exhaust itself to empower another gear, and Glowstone blows up at the end of the turn, dealing 5 damage to all units you control. But if you empower it for 2, you can pass it to your opponent, and it's just a game of hot potato basically. However, the formula lets you play it for free while your opponent is quickly going down on resources. Otherwise, it's just a lot of what we've seen already in the Lux deck, with the Jayce and Vanguard Armory combo, Watcher, Bellows Breath, and a bunch of removal in cards like Call the Weak, Hidden Blade, and Imperial Decree. And some cards to quickly get on board as well, like Sprite Fountain and Xin Xiao, who comes in ready if you have 2 units in your base. We also run Aspiring Engineer to return gear from the trash to your hand, and Carrion Dredger, who is an excellent enabler for our champion, Viktor Leader. This Viktor creates a 1 might recruit whenever a non-recruit friendly unit dies, while the Carrion Dredger creates a bird token when it dies, meaning that if Viktor is out, the Dredger represents a potential 4 1 might units for just 2 energy. We run into a Jayce in this game, and unfortunately it is an Aurora Jayce. We start with the Dredger, and they set up a Garbage Grabber, ensuring that at some point throughout this game they have access to infinite Elder Dragons. When he passes back to me, I set up a Hextech Formula and make a recruit with Viktor, and then he draws a bit with a repeated downstage Dramatics. As we get back to my turn, we lose a rune for conquering the Sigil of the Storm before making another idiot in base. I also drop Jayce, just hoping to develop faster than they do, and we're not doing the combo here. That said, they do pick up the speed quite a bit when they play 2 energy conduits. We hold up to 4 and conquer to 5, make another idiot, and hide a Hidden Blade before getting our Viktor Leader out. Now, I 100% hid this at the wrong battlefield, but that is just me being bad at the game, and I'll know better for next time, maybe. He draws once again with another Dramatics and finds his Aurora. This gets him to an Elder Dragon, which kills 3 of my units, though the Hidden Blade does let me draw 2 cards at least. On my turn, I double conquer once again, going to 7 and passing him a Hot Potato. It doesn't do much, but it does force him to pay 2 power every turn if he wants to get out smaller units, I guess. Honestly, it's not all that impactful. It might have been better in other matchups, and I should have just played Call of the Week here, but I continue to be dumb and bad at this game. The Call of the Week would have prevented the Elder Dragon from holding a battlefield, and if another dragon came down, it would have forced him to be played at base, meaning I could have Sprite Fountain and Jayced for game. On his turn, he clears my board with a Bellows Breath and plays an egg, as well as empowering his legend, letting him untap his egg and conduit. He makes a bunch of resources and puts a Gutter Palace on the board. Luckily, with the hot potato out, he needs to invest into it to pass it back to me if he wants to get onto his win condition. He conquers the Veiled Temple, and his Aurora gets him yet another Elder Dragon, which kills my last unit. All I can really do here is pass back the potato, and on his turn, he conquers the Sigil of the Storm, going to 3 points, and eventually playing a Promising Future. This lands me into a Hidden Blade, which kills his dragon, before yet another Promising Future comes out. This time I get a Sprite Fountain, while he gets an Aurora. With that, he Bellow Breaths my unit and lets the hot potato pop before he grabs another dragon with the Aurora. Now luckily, the Sprite Fountain that he gifted me makes me a readied unit. I drop an Imperial Decree to kill his dragons, which he also so graciously put in one location. From there, I play another Sprite Fountain, allowing me to conquer both battlefields for a game, which I 100% would have lost if he didn't play that second Promising Future. The dude was doing God's work for me, and I am up to 14-7.
Let the storm follow in my wake.
Our penultimate Origins legend is going to be Volibear, who channels a rune whenever you play a mighty unit. Volibear's deck is essentially just the dragon package like I did with Garen, however it is much stronger as we have a real legend this time, as well as access to red and orange rather than orange and yellow. This gives us access to Blazing Scorcher, a 5 might dragon for 5 energy that can be accelerated and basically is an easy unit to proc volley. At the top end, we also have Involius Vox, who gives a unit plus 8 might when it conquers, which is a pretty solid combo when used with the Dragon Roost. And most importantly, Kadrigan, who draws a card for each mighty unit you control when you play him. This card is bonkers strong, and drawing 4 or 5 cards at once is pretty common. The only other additions now that we have access to red are going to be Sky Splitter, which deals 5 damage to a unit at a battlefield but gets discounted by the highest might of units you control, and Volley's signature spell, Stormbringer, which deals damage equal to the might of a unit in your base to all enemies at a battlefield. Then you move your friendly unit to that battlefield afterwards. It is an okay finisher, but otherwise it's just the orange ramp and dragons that we had from Garen as well. But like, man do I love this deck, and we get paired into yet another Renekton with it. They go kinda nuts on turn 1 playing a Punching Poro, and then use Renekton to drop a Noxus Hopeful. Meanwhile, I just mobilize and pass. Turn 2, they double conquer and develop a Mirai in base, and I get to use the Dragon Roost to take out his Poro with a Blazing Scorcher. Importantly, the Volley Legend refunds one of the 2 power that I paid for the battlefield, which is very, very nice here. He pulls out and develops a Flaming Chompers, and I use the Breathing Room to play a Catalyst and a Dragon Soul Sage before pulling out myself. Again, he double conquers, plays another Mirai, and when he passes it back, I play 2 Heralds to discount future dragons. Then I conquer Zon Warrens to cycle a card and pass back to him. Renekton holds to 6 and uses 2 units to take the Warrens back before playing a Kaisa and a Poro. With Heralds out, a Corrupted Dragon comes in for only 6 energy and comes in ready, letting me take the Warrens once again. I cycle into an Elder Dragon and fortify the Warrens to avoid him taking it from me. Yes, he is at 7, but the idea is that if he does the same thing that I'm doing at the Dragon Roost, I can play the Elder Dragon, snipe the biggest unit, and hopefully kill the rest with the dragon itself. Instead, he plays in Endless Riches, which gets him a Kinku Monk. On my turn, I drop the Elder, killing the Kaisa and the Monk, and conquer to 6. Also, it is my turn to cheat, as I forgot to pay the 2 power for the battlefield. Luckily, it doesn't make an impact as he gives up on his turn, but either way we are at 15-7.
Death is like the wind, always by my side.
And finally we have our last Origins champion, Yasuo. This is a green and purple legend who can pay 2 energy to move a friendly unit to or from your base. This is a very expensive cost that kinda holds the deck back. I mean, it can often feel like a more expensive version of Misfortune, who gives your cards ganking for free, right? But when combined with cards like Stellar Corn Herder, who draws every time she moves, or Treasure Hunter, who makes a gold every time she moves, or Vex, who needs to be at a battlefield, or all of the cards that benefit from this quick acceleration very easily, I mean, there's a lot of value to be had. It's also very solid with Baron Nashor, as you can let him move onto other battlefields much more easily. Now, almost every card in this deck has been talked about earlier in this video, but we do have a few new ones. Flash is a reaction speed spell that lets you pull up to 2 units at battlefields back to your base, triggering all of those move effects we just talked about and helping you dodge some abilities, as well as giving you pseudo-ganking when it's used aggressively. Yasuo's champion deals damage equal to his might to units at the battlefield he attacks into, but he is very expensive, and when he's used with his legend, you need 8 energy available, which usually just results in him being bounced. It's a lot of investment for not great payoff. Luckily, a new card from Vendetta helps. Twilight Shroud is a 1 energy spell that gives a 1 might boost and makes it so that that unit can't be chosen by enemy spells or abilities for the rest of the turn, keeping your unit safe for greedier plays, and importantly, you also get to cast it from your trash for a flow cost, which gives you a lot more bang for your buck. Our game with this deck is into a LeBlanc, a deck that I famously struggle going into. I don't know, man, this just puts me on tilt almost every time I play into it, and I just can't find the reason. She chooses for me to start, and I get a crab onto the board. Then on my next turn, I conquer and drop a Vex and hide a Zhonya's to keep her safe. They play a Seal and use Hidden Blade to kill Vex. Luckily, the Zhonya's means that I get to survive and still get the draw too, and Vex, having Deflect, really puts them behind. They have basically skipped their turn, lost a rune, and given me 2 draws. Their Dignitary kills my crab, and looking at their hand, it seems like they are playing a Black Rose theme, which is cool, but I don't know how useful it is. She uses the LeBlanc legend to clone the Dignitary and then drops a LeBlanc before she passes back to me. Unfortunately for her, I draw my second on guard, letting me boost Vex to 8 might, which kills all 3 of her units, and they give up on the spot. As we can see, Yasuo is the best deck confirmed, and he ends our Origin run with a powerful score of 16-7. Alright, let's talk Origins real quick now that we're done all of the champions. I think most of them held up pretty well. There's a couple that felt kind of clunky, and obviously a few of the decks I built very strange as well, but Jinx graveyard meme bullshit clearly didn't work. But as a whole, I feel like most of the games went pretty well, and that's like with me being a pretty bad player in general. Yeah, there's a couple people who just disconnected after a couple rounds because like they got tilted or whatever. We're just gonna have to roll with those. There's too many decks to actually go through where like we just gotta take a win for a win, you know? And like I try and do, if they do drop too quickly, I'll queue up another game. But if we're like 4, 5, 6 turns in, we're just gonna roll with it. My big takeaway though was the Misfortune Gangplank deck list that I did was super fun, and it felt fantastic to actually get online and going. There was just so much potential to make Gangplank incredibly powerful in that, and I think we could maybe work that into like the Kha Zix list going forward, maybe Sivir. Anything with purple and orange, you have a ton of potential there. You might also be able to do blue and orange with Jayce and work on like lowering Gangplank stats with like Stupefy, and then he gets a boost instead, and then you also get a card draw. That might be something really fun to experiment with. Other than that though, like Kai'Sa felt great, Lee Sin felt pretty okay, which was surprising to me. The Dragon deck is always going to be super powerful for Volibear, I think. Like the comeback potential we had there into that Renekton felt fantastic. But yeah, my big 2 takeaways so far throughout this entire video: I gotta play more Annie because damn she's fun, and I gotta play more Misfortune because damn she's fun.
Shurima, your Emperor has returned.
Into Spirit Forge, and we have the Birdman himself. Azir is the green and yellow legend and focuses on equipment and tokens. More specifically, every time you play an equipment, he allows you to exhaust him and pay 1 energy to create a 2 might Sand Soldier. And importantly, he also gives all of your Sand Soldiers Weapon Master, letting you equip a gear to them at a discount whenever they get played. The deck kind of builds itself for the most part. We're playing maxed out copies of Doran's Shield, Eye of the Herald, and Soul Sword, as they are the cheapest gear that we have access to at 1 energy, allowing you to also play a Sand Soldier on turn 1 alongside them. At 2 energy, we have the Brutalizer, which gives a bigger boost on the turn that it is first equipped, and a card that I personally like, that others don't seem to, being Sacred Shears, giving the equipped unit the death knell to draw a card. And finally, we also run BF Sword because sometimes you just need big numbers. Now, most of the spells in this deck will be familiar at this point, with 3 exceptions. Death Grip lets you sacrifice a unit at reaction speed and pass their might to another unit, which can kind of double dip on the equipment value. Also, it draws you a card, which is just nice on top of that. Guards is a spell that can be hidden and plays a Sand Soldier, so you can hide this, flip it up when your opponent swings in, and then attach a BF sword for a surprising 5 might blocker. And finally, we have Azir's signature spell, Arise. This makes a Sand Soldier for every equipment you have out, and readies 2 of them as well, acting as a massive reset and potential finisher when combined with our chosen champion, Azir Sovereign, who can be accelerated and can also pull in any or all of your tokens with him to a battlefield. That is very strong. As for units, we have Scuttlecrab, Vi, and a new card with Riven, who deals 2 damage to a unit at a battlefield whenever she attacks into it for each equipment that she has on her. I don't think this is a great card, but I did want to test her out, and this seems like one of the best decks to try her out in. Anyways, we get matched into an Akali, and unfortunately we just get very out-tempoed. We have a pretty hard time getting developed this game, and their card draw with Kai'Sa and Scuttlecrab ensures that they always have answers to just about anything that we do, while their green Akali unit becomes very hard for us to deal with, and when we finally do clear it out, an empowered red Akali is able to basically ping anything that we set up for 4 damage thanks to her legend, and as a result, we just can't keep up. It was pretty bad, so let's just get into game 2, a very different matchup into yet another Akali. This time, we're going first, and by conquering Ornn's Forge on our second turn, we can both develop another Sand Soldier and keep enough energy up for a back off if needed. Unfortunately, she empowers her Akali, swings in, and uses her legend to pull it back, killing my soldier while developing an Inferna as well. We try to take back the Forge, and after a small +2 spell from each of us, we eventually take the point and continue developing soldiers. That Akali is super scary though, and by using her legend, it basically guarantees it can kill any unit that we put out that isn't exactly Vi or something that's boosted by a BF sword. So I hide a Hidden Blade and hope for the best. This time she empowers her legend and tries the loop again, but the Hidden Blade comes in to solve that problem, only to be defied. If that wasn't bad enough, by making use of an Inferna and the Star Spring, she's able to take another point while keeping Akali safe. From here, we basically do the same thing, develop an equipment, take back the battlefield, and hide a card, this time being guards. Back to her, and she plays a Stellar Corn and passes, hoping to keep her Akali safe from whatever's hiding. However, this gives us a chance to develop a BF sword, take the other battlefield, and pray that we should be pretty safe. Currently our board is pretty big, but our hand is empty, and by abusing Stella, she can potentially get a lot of card advantage on us. Stella moves in, and a longsword is quick drawn onto her, but by flipping guards, I can contest the battlefield. Another discipline comes out, and he uses his legend to pull Stella away to safety and draw another card, and another when he moves her right back in and adds another longsword. This time, we back off to protect ourselves, and she passes back, letting us hold to 7 while they are only at 2. Since I'm in a safe spot, I pull all of my units back and drop my Azir, preparing for a final push. She does all she can to clean out my units and get some card draw with Stella, but I just have too much to work with, and a Vi in hand, so there's not much that she can really do, and with that, the opponent calls GG and we take the game, leaving us with a total of 17 and 8 so far. I really do like the idea behind Azir, but it's another deck that I just seem to really struggle with, which is unfortunate because I want to like it so much more than I do.
Welcome to the League of Draven.
On to Draven, a purple and red legend who draws a card every time you win a combat. A crazy powerful effect to the point that the deck got a few targeted bans. But I have only ever played 1 game of him before, so it does look like I missed the time to try him at full power. Even so, he looks great here. Our deck is very similar to what we saw with Annie, but by throwing in a few more cards to cheat combats like Rebuke, Gust, and Overzealous Fan, we can get his legend ability to trigger pretty easily. We also have Draven's signature gear, Spinning Axe, which can be quick drawn in to give a unit 3 might, though if you drop it and it isn't attached to a unit at the start of your turn, it does destroy itself. We throw in a pair of red Reksais for some extra speed in the deck, and of course our champion who gets 1 might for each point that we have in the game so far. This time we're into yet another Akali, but they miss their turn 1 so we can develop a bit. On our second turn we take Zaun so we can cycle a card, and I drop a Vex to insulate myself just a little bit. This would force her to empower his Akali if he wanted to take my battlefield, but I'd net a card draw thanks to the fan. So instead, they take the other battlefield and then drop in a Jhin. On my turn, I take things slow, developing a Kai'Sa in base and choosing to leave Zaun as is, in hopes of forcing out some resources and maybe baiting a card draw. This time, he does empower Akali and drops a new equipment from Vendetta that boosts the unit's might by 2 when they move to a battlefield. We do force a combat win and get a card draw thanks to the overzealous fan, which prevents them from using Akali because she is only at action speed. We pull back the Vex and conquer to draw with Kai'Sa, also pulling her to safety with a Forerunner. Akali kills the mech and places a Stellar Corn, and when they go in to conquer Zaun with Jhin, I try to ride the wind, but I get defied. He drops in an extra axe for Jhin, which lets us take Stella out with Kai'Sa. Then I drop a Noxus Hopeful to pull her to safety, as well as a ready to Darius who takes out the other battlefield, bringing us to 6. The card draw in this deck is absolutely disgusting, and if that wasn't enough, we can also develop another overzealous fan as well. This pretty much locks them out of the game, and we managed to pull out a win in just one game, with Draven setting us to 18-8.
I'm rated E for Ezreal.
Yet again, this brings us to a deck that I want to like, but which I just really don't flow well with. Blue and purple is by far my favorite combination in the game, as far as card pools go, but when it comes to actual legends, I just don't click with any who aren't Diana. But for now, of course, we are at Ezreal. He has the ability that if you've targeted your opponent's units twice this turn, you can exhaust him to draw a card. So it's kind of railroaded to targeting spells and abilities, which limits you a little bit in deck construction. It's not always a bad thing in and of itself, but I do tend to struggle with legends that do just one thing. Anyways, his chosen champion, Ezreal Prodigy, is a monster of a card. This unit allows you to discard 1 when it gets played, and then draw 2. And he makes it so that all of your additional costs are reduced by either an energy or power. You can think of things like Accelerate or Repeat, for example. Our deck largely revolves around targeting abilities like Stupefy, Bellows Breath, and Gust, but we also get to make use of Pack of Wonders as well. We've talked about this briefly in other decks, but this gear allows you to bounce a unit or gear back to hand, and when paired with Treasure Trove, has you ramping and drawing every turn. Or you could bounce units to regain access to their on-play effects, like the Ezreal we just mentioned, Fizz to loop spells, Thousand Tail Watcher to break your opponent's board, Mind Splitter to see their hand and force a discard, or the best option, Bewitching Sprite, which is a cheap unit that makes your opponent discard a card. Being able to repeat this effect over and over again is brutal, and if your opponent can't kill it, they are stuck in top decking mode forever. The only other new cards to mention here are going to be Arcane Shift, Ezreal's signature spell that lets you banish a friendly unit and then replay while dealing 3 damage to an enemy unit at a battlefield, and Eclipse, which allows you to lower a unit's might by 4 and then has you predict. I would say that this is a pretty straightforward deck, but it has a very high skill ceiling, and the amount of options you often have is kind of both a strong benefit and a bit overwhelming sometimes. Anyways, let's look into my match with Viktor. Right away, this is already a bit of a rough matchup. A lot of the spells in our deck lower mights, and when we're only dealing with 1 might tokens, we aren't really getting a lot of mileage. On top of that, even if we force him to discard his entire hand, he can always make those tokens. Luckily, he disconnects super early, so we don't have to take an actual loss, and we can just try again. This time we're into a Teemo who opens with a stacked deck and drops a turn 1 Nocturne. We unfortunately don't have access to any units, so we play a Pack of Wonders and use our own stacked deck, drawing into Treasure Trove. Back to him, and a sneaky deckhand steals him a free point and lets him hide cards at Bandletree, while Nocturne takes over Zaun Warrens as well. We still don't have any units, so I use the pack on the Treasure Trove and hopefully draw into something useful, which I do not. By the time I get anything on board, he's already at 6 points and has Vex stopping a Watcher from accelerating in and dealing with the board. Needless to say, this game goes very poorly. I do manage to claw my way back into the game a little bit, but a switcheroo lets his Windstinger run over my Watcher, and that's the game, giving us a pretty rough loss for the first full matchup. Game 2 is into a Master Yi, which I expect to go much better, as long as we can avoid a Ruin Runner and an Ambessa. He gets a Poro onto the Grove of the Godwillow and buffs it, before tapping out with a First Mate to send his Pit Rookie into Zaun Warrens. I take the opportunity to gust away his Poro instead of the Pit Rookie, letting him score this point. This might look a little bit weird, but I wouldn't be able to run over the Poro and he would get a card draw on his turn, whereas I can use 2 Stupefies in my hand to beat over the Pit Rookie, while also drawing 2 cards and activating my Legend. I draw into some great tools here and keep an energy up for Gust after playing a Pack of Wonders. Unfortunately, the Gust gets defied, and with an On Guard, he runs over my Ezreal. On my turn, all I can do is dig through my deck a bit and put a Vex in my base. Then we pass it back, letting Yi conquer up to 5 and develop his champion in the base. I use Fizz to once again gust away his Poro, and I conquer with Vex, hiding a Wages of Pain to protect her. Then I play another Fizz to play an Arcane Shift, killing his first mate, and getting access to yet another spell from my trash. He protects his unit with a Defy, but even so, it is marked for the damage. Fizz gets me a stacked deck, and I use the list to lower his first mate to 0 health, and from there I keep up some energy for a Star-Crossed or an Eclipse as I pass back to him. His Master Yi goes into Zon Warrens, and he throws a Trinity Force on it, so on my turn, I forget the Grove trigger, naturally, and use Eclipse to bait out a Defy. It actually goes through though, letting a Deadly Flourish kill his Yi. Unfortunately, he does have a Rengar to maintain control of the battlefield, but it gets stunned by Vex, giving me a great chance to kill it. I bounce the list, replay it choosing cats, and with that I can swing in with both Fizzes to conquer. On his turn, he plays another Rengar and a Poro, but with Vex down, it doesn't really help. We hold the 6 and force a discard with Sprite, then we Star-Crossed it and Rengar and replay it for its second discard. He is able to trade his Poro for my Vex and drops the Rengar and a Punch first to kill the Fizzes. This has Zon draw him into a Charm, which he uses to kill my Sprite as well. Back to me, and a Watcher and List combo lets me kill his cat, and a dead draw on his side means that we take the game, bringing us to 19-9.
I long for a worthy opponent.
Fiora is the orange and yellow legend for Spiritforge and focuses on making units mighty. When you do that, she can exhaust herself to channel a rune, and it's kind of similar to Volley. I really like this deck, and the few cards that we got added to it from Vendetta make a massive impact. Kayle, as we mentioned, empowers herself to jump to 5 might, making it an easy proc for our legend. Rampage is a very powerful fight spell that also lets us give a unit a 2 might boost, often making them mighty. Tools of Empire can be exhausted to give a unit 2 might or 4 if it's empowered, meaning we have a permanent activator for our legend every turn once it's developed. Onslaught is a card I'm kinda iffy about, but it's a 4-mana spell that gives us a 6 might boost for the turn, and can be cast from flow as well. The orange Renekton is a 4 might unit with a 1 energy ability that boosts himself by 1 might as many times as you want to use it. This gives us another easy activator for just paying 1 energy each turn. We're also throwing in a Gangplank for some stickiness. We have a Harness and Elder Dragon for removal, and for protection we have Shen, which is a unit that we can play at reaction speed, which has Shield 2 and Tank, and notably when the Shield 2 goes off, it does become mighty, triggering Fiora. On top of that, we have Riposte, which is Fiora's signature spell, which counters a spell and gives might equal to its cost to something you control. And finally, Unsung Hero, a 2 might unit that lets you draw 2 cards when she dies if she was mighty. This is such a fun deck, I need to play it more. We get matched into an Ambessa and we start with a pretty decent hand, Pit Rookie and Tools of the Empire, as well as a BF Sword to give us plenty of activators. On Ambessa's second turn, they move in a Noxian Emissary, empowering it for a discount from the battlefield and then dropping in a Fae, meaning anything we put on the board will be charmed. Because of that, I choose to equip the BF Sword and use Fiora to channel, and then take the battlefield from them, though they do get 2 recruits out of me doing this. They use one of those to swing in with Vi, so I sacrifice to get some resources out of the exchange. She then uses Ambessa to pull Vi to safety, so on my turn I just drop in a Kayle, empower her, ramp, and then equip the sword. Ambessa buffs her Vi with a Pit Rookie, plays an orange Ambessa to base, and conquers the Sunken Temple with a recruit. This lets me take it out on my turn, use it to get some card draw, then play a buff monkey and the tools in my base, boosting the monkey with it to channel. Now this Kayle looks a bit vulnerable, but we have Call to Glory, Punch First, or even Sacrifice if needed. They swing in with a Vi and an Ambessa, stunning Kayle, so I use Call to Glory and Punch First to survive the fight and push them back. They then develop and empower the yellow Ambessa on the other battlefield and pull her to safety with the legend. She also swings in with the Fae and Pit Rookie, pulling my monkey and trading off some units. Now I do draw into Elder Dragon here, but I can't afford it, so instead I drop the Harness Dragon to kill the yellow Ambessa before pulling the Kayle back and empowering her once again. On their turn, a Public Execution kills my dragon, and I'm 1 energy short for the Elder Dragon on my turn, and ultimately that cost me the game. Game 2 brings us into a Zed. We miss our turn 1, but drop a Fiora on turn 2. They don't push on their second turn, and just play a Kai'Sa in their base. So I follow their lead, developing a Renekton without conquering. On their third turn, we finally have the first points of the game, they conquer in, and then flash their units out, developing a second Kai'Sa in their base. When they pass it back, I boost the Renekton, channel with Fiora, and conquer Sunken Temple to draw into a Shen, which makes me feel confident enough to move Fiora in as well. They boost their Kai'Sa with a Gust Monk, and swing into the temple with her and the Frog, not expecting a Shen to drop in. They then try to ride the wind out, but a Riposte stops them, and I unfortunately put the might on Shen rather than the Renekton, which I think is dumb and bad, but who's to say? Luckily, they flash out anyways, meaning I get to keep the Shen, and they choose to drop a Rasa, passing the turn so I can hold to 4. I buff Fiora with a Pit Rookie, channel Rune with my Legend, and pass back with a ton of energy up. He does a big swing into my Fiora, so I drop a punch first, killing his Rasa and his Frogman. His backup plan is a Fizz into stack deck, which gets him a Blighted Battle Axe, which could be super scary. He sticks it onto Kai'Sa, swings into the temple with his monk for a total of 10 might, and a second punch first comes in, but unfortunately he has the hard bargain. But more unfortunately for him, I have the energy, so I just pay it and boost the Shen, which again, I should have boosted the Renekton. One day I promise I will learn. On my turn I hold the 6 and pull my units to safety since they are only at 2 currently. I develop a second Renekton in base and pass back. They have a dead draw, but they get 2 more chances at drawing into something useful by equipping the Battle Axe to Kai'Sa and conquering the temple. This gives them a Death Mark and a Cleave, which just isn't going to save them here. So GG, another win and another loss, bringing us to 20 and 10.
Give them an inch, they'll take a kingdom.
Now, from one of my favorite decks to my all-time GOAT, we have finally reached Irelia. This is Spiritforge's green and purple legend who allows you to pay a power whenever you choose one of your units with a spell or ability to ready them. And when paired with Irelia Fervent, her champion card, you can go kinda nuts with it. This unit gets 1 might whenever she is chosen by a friendly spell or ability, or when she is readied. And she has Deflect. And tying up the package, we have Defiant Dance, her signature spell, which also gives +2 might to a friendly unit and -2 might to an opponent's unit. So if you have an exhausted Irelia at a battlefield, this spell gives +2, then you get +1 for targeting her, then you can ready her with the legend for another +1, and you can drop your opponent by -2, which seems pretty okay. Add in the Abandoned Hall battlefield from Unleashed, which says that whenever you cast a spell, you can choose a unit there to give +1 might. But we are choosing a unit, which means Irelia gets +2 might instead. Every time you play a spell, are you seeing the picture? This is such a fun deck. On top of the Irelia package, we also make use of all of Green's battle tricks, like On Guard and Discipline, as well as some cheap spells like Stack Deck to make the most of Abandoned Hall, and we also have the new Twilight Shroud, which makes Irelia a nightmare to deal with. To control the board, we have Gust, Charm, and Flash, then we have Ride the Wind, Boots of Swiftness, and Tide Turner to give us a ton of mobility and aggressive options, and arguably the strongest card in the deck, Stellarcorn, who draws every time she moves. It is crazy. And defensively, we also have things like Guardian Angel, Zonias, and Defy. Of course, we then have Fizz to reuse all of these amazing spells, and Starcross to be a general bastard of a card. Finally, our last addition is going to be the green Akali from Vendetta, who gets a 2 might boost whenever she moves to a battlefield, and cannot be targeted by opponent's spells or abilities if she is not in combat. This is just very powerful and hard to deal with if they ever get rid of Irelia. God, I love this deck. We run into a Mel who misses their first turn, letting us get into Scuttle Crab for free. Meanwhile, they set up a Researcher, and back to my turn, I am forced into the Abandoned Hall because the Frozen Fortress would kill my crab otherwise. She empowers and kills my crab, revealing their hand, which is just filled with counterspells, as well as having a Starcrossed, a Fizz, and a Bewitching Spirit. They drop a list calling Targon, and finally we get to work picking apart their hand. I On Guard, which gets rebuttaled. Then I move into the fortress with Stella to get a draw. I swap back with Tide Turner, stealing another draw and pass back to them. On her turn, she drops in a blue Mel and pulls back the Researcher before using her legend in tandem with the fortress to kill my Tide Turner, dropping it to 0 health while already being marked for damage. She then drops in a Student, and here I finally get to work catching up. I conquer with Stella and draw, then Tide Turner her for an additional draw and put my Irelia into play, meaning they now have 2 major problems to deal with. They manage to kill the Tide Turner and conquer the hall, and use the list to set up a Bellows Breath that kills Stella, and for some reason they also choose to hit Irelia, forcing her to pay a deflect cost for no reason. This apparently is so demoralizing that they choose to leave. And listen, I got my win here, but I actually love playing this deck so much that I went back for another round and was matched into an Annie. And our green Akali ripped through this deck. Turns out Swiftfoot Boots are just as good on her as they are on Irelia. Regardless, bonus game aside, we are now at 21 wins and 10 losses.
Imagine if I had a real weapon.
On to Jax, a legend I have never played properly. I used to mess around with an Aurora list for him based on Tiana Crown Guard, but that's kinda it. Jax is the orange and green legend for Spiritforged and is all about equipment. He can be exhausted along with 1 energy to attach any equipment you control to one of your units, or if that equipment is already on a unit, you can move it to another unit for free. This works pretty well with his champion unit who has Weapon Master, and lets you draw a card if you pay 1 energy when attaching to him. His signature spell is also amazing. Counterstrike allows a unit to dodge the next source of damage that would be dealt to them and draws you a card, which is just super solid. This deck is largely stuff we've seen already, but there are a few cool additions as well. Along with Brutalizer and Guardian Angel, we are also adding in Bone Shiver, which channels a rune when you conquer with it. Then there's Spellsonger, that copies a unit's text. Lucian is another Weapon Master unit that readies when he conquers, and literally everything else is just good stuff that we've seen in other decks. Notably, the Akali and Gangplank are brutal to deal with, especially if they have a bunch of might from equipment, so they can get out of hand pretty quickly. We pair into an Ambessa who misses their first turn, and a Fey Folk makes it a little awkward for them to develop. She risks dropping the Ambessa out anyways, so I play a Brutalizer, boost the boy, and use a Rampage to kill her before conquering afterwards. It is a very strong but kind of expensive start. She drops in a Rengar and takes back the temple, so I just develop my Jax and use him to draw. Unfortunately, she returns the Rampage favor and kills Jax, so I just set up a Skull Crab and a Fey Folk before passing back. Ambessa holds to 3, dropping in an Emissary that she empowers, which lets her legend help Rengar swing over to the Sunken Temple. This scores them a point and draws them a card. But I turn Fey Folk into a big ol' monster, and she tries to overpower him with a Guttural Roar, only for a Discipline to push me over. She then tries to punch first, but we do the same, and she tries to use Shadow Call, not realizing it isn't action or reaction speed, and when that fails, they just dip. I think they might have just invested too many resources here and just left themselves with nothing. Either way, we take the win and go to 22-10.
Everybody dies. Some just need a little help.
The next legend is kind of similar. Lucian is in the orange and red colors and gives your equipment Assault. Basically, it is just a hyper aggro list making use of some solid units, like Lucian, as well as Kai'Sa and Rengar in tandem with equipment like long swords and pendulum blades for big bursts of might. And when all else fails, we have the Skyfall and Trinity Force combo. Skyfall of Arion makes your conquer effects happen when you hold as well, and vice versa, while the Trinity Force gives you an extra point when holding. So basically, you can double up your points when conquering and holding when these two are on the same unit. It is extremely powerful when it happens. You know, if it happens. Outside of that, we have Gem Jammer, a 2-drop that gives a unit ganking, Piercing Light, which is basically a smaller falling star that can be repeated, and Lucian's signature spell, Relentless Pursuit. This is more or less a Ride the Wind that also lets you attach a gear to the unit being moved. Then, when that unit conquers, you can pull them back to your base, which in combination with Lucian's champion allows you to ready him and conquer the other battlefield as well. The deck isn't great, but it definitely has some really spicy turns and it can be powerful when it works. Our first game on Lucian is into Kennen, and this game is brutal for us, as he is able to continuously bounce our units back to hand and swarm the board with Rasas and Nocturnes. He just completely overruns us, and there wasn't really that much I could do. And then we run into a Jinx. She hits us with an Invert Timelines early on, and this quickly lets her get out Rasa and her champion unit on her 4th turn. Meanwhile, I set up a Kai'Sa with a Trinity Force, but I don't have an effective way to protect her, so I need to hold her back. Instead, opting to set up a pair of Fey Folks. Jinx sends a Rasa into the Sunken Temple, but my Rengar ambushes in to offer a trade. Instead, Jinx uses Heedless Resurrection to revive a Fizz, and hits us with yet another Invert Timelines. Thanks to this discarding, Jinx is boosted up to the point where she can run over our cat, and they fill up their base with units. On my turn, I take out the Jinx with a Kai'Sa, drawing 2 for conquering, and then using First Mate to pull her to safety. A Fey Folk conquer brings us to 6, and we send it back to her. Right now, she's only at 2 points, so I do feel pretty safe, though they end up playing an Endless Riches. This does give them access to 7 new cards, however, with just 1 energy left, and with me having a base full of units, it's pretty much done for. In the end, we go 1-1 on Lucian, bringing us to a new score of 23-11.
My forge is my home.
Following Lucian is yet another gear-based legend with Ornn. Ornn is in the blue and green colors and has the ability to pay a power for gear costs or abilities. Basically, it's Kai'Sa for gears. We get some really cool cards in this deck that most other decks don't really get to make use of, so I'm very excited for it. Firstly, Ornn Forge God. This unit has Deflect 2, as well as getting 1 might for each gear on your board. and we are using one of his 3 signature gears, Irelia's Requiem, which readies units when you play it and gives all of your units at its location ganking. We also have some other cards that benefit from gear as well. Pit Crew readies itself whenever you play a gear, Plaza Guardian gets a discount for each gear you control, Legion Quartermaster bounces a gear to let you replay it, and the new patched Porobot is a gear unit that draws a card if it enters when you have 3 other gear on the board. Ornn is also the best user of 2 extremely powerful gear, being Sprite Fountain, which makes you 1 sprite on 2 separate turns, and Poro Snacks, which draws you a card when it enters and when you pay to destroy it. And since Ornn discounts the power cost, he gets a ton of value out of both of them. The only other new card we gotta talk about for this deck is Mask of Foresight, which gives your units 1 might when they attack or defend alone, which is kind of what the deck is all about, meaning it can be very strong here. And finally, Helm of Suppression, which raises the cost of all opponent spells by 1 energy, or an energy and a power if this card is empowered. Ornn gets matched up into a Sivir, and we are off to an early lead thanks to a Sprite Fountain. We get to sacrifice our Sprite to the Duskrose Lab to draw a card before making another Sprite and reconquering the battlefield. We then develop a Pit Crew, which is readied with a Mask of Foresight, and we conquer 2-3. We're feeling pretty good, but then they drop a Yone, and things get very sketchy very quickly. If he conquers an empty battlefield, he can usually kill just about any of my units in base. And since their repair specialist can run over my only non-temporary unit, that's a bit of a problem, which is made worse when I misplay by not playing the Pit Crew before dropping a Poro Snacks. Instead, I play Ornn and pass, the absolute worst possible thing I could have done, as she plays a Fizz, uses a stack deck, and finds Boots of Swiftness, meaning his Yone now has ganking and can trigger every turn, as well as giving him enough might to kill my Ornn. After this, we go back to me, and Pit Crew into Porobot, as well as 2 Disciplines, lets the Pit Crew kill Yone and conquer, scoring us to 4. They pretty easily take both battlefields on their turn, going up to 5, and develop a Pack of Wonders and Treasure Trove combo to build resources. Finally, she rounds out using a Rampage to kill my Porobot and hide a card. We are in trouble, but I have yet another Pit Crew, readied with a Poro Snacks, and he takes Zon Warrens back for me. Zon cycles us into a Porobot, who draws a card and lets us pull the Pit Crew back to safety. We follow this up with a Helm of Suppression, and importantly, this both readies the Pit Crew and makes it so that if the hidden card is a spell, the opponent won't be able to afford it right now. So we can safely send our Pit Crew into the unit and overtake it thanks to the Mask of Foresight. Her Sivir champion comes in accelerated and takes back the lab, and yet another 3-drop joins her for a total defensive might of 9. We start our turn with another Poro Snacks and then sacrifice 1 to draw, getting us to the only out in the deck, Twilight Shroud. Brutalizer gets attached to the Porobot, boosting him to 5. Twilight Shroud gets played on him and boosts him to 6, with the Flowcast bringing him to 7. I then sack all of my other snacks, looking for some more value, which brings us to an On Guard, boosting him to 9, just edging out thanks to the mask. And ultimately, this causes the opponent to surrender. This is a huge win and one of the most fantastic games in the video, in my opinion. 24-11 currently. With that, we come to one of my least favorite legends, unfortunately, Reksai. I just don't play her very well, I don't know. She is a red and yellow legend, and when you conquer, you can exhaust her to look at the top 2 cards of your deck. You also get the ability to play one of those cards, which is kind of neat. Her signature spell does basically the same thing, but better. Void Rush lets you look at the top 2 cards and then play up to 1 of them at a discount of 2 energy. You can then add the other card or any that you don't play to your hand. Luckily, we've talked about almost all of the cards in this deck already, but there are a few exceptions. Blood Rush is a repeatable spell that lets you give a unit Assault 2 or 4 if repeated. Rally the Troops draws a card and buffs all of your units that you play this turn, including tokens, which we see in both Faithful Manufacturer and Vanguard Captain. And we have 2 really powerful board boosting abilities. First is the Under Titan. If you reveal this card from your deck, you can generate 2 energy, but if you play it from hand, all of your units get 2 might for the turn. And finally, a new gear, the Rage Amplifier. This boosts all of your units by 1 might or 2 if it's empowered. This is just a basic go-wide aggro deck with some anthems and a bit of gambling. We find our way into a match with a Misfortune and get a solid start with a handful of low-cost units. Honest Broker conquers on turn 2, and we get a good push setting up a Carrion Dredger and a Noxus Hopeful in base. Now I should have used Reksai here, but like I said, I'm bad and dumb, and this deck stresses me out. On top of that, we kind of already have the perfect hand, and I'd just be looking for things I already have. I should still do it 100%, but I'm not too worried about this overall at this point. I've talked about this a couple times in the video, but when I have a play that I already want to be doing and I get kind of excited for, I often overlook abilities that are just sitting on the field for what's in my hand. It is a big problem I need to work on. Regardless, by turn 2, my opponent just has a pair of Pack of Wonders out and passes back to me, allowing us to conquer the other battlefield and go to 3 on our turn. We get an Emissary and a Vanguard Captain out, along with 2 new recruits. They play a Misfortune of base, and again, we hold and conquer to 5, and more importantly, we set up a Rage Amplifier and another Captain, giving us a crazy board with 27 might in base on just our 4th turn. They take the back alley bar and use a Rampage to clear one of my recruits before flashing out, and it's just over at this point. We conquer, use Reksai finally to find a Void Rush, and that gets us into an Under Titan for our hand, as well as a free Inferna. We conquer the bar, and that's just all she wrote. There's really no answer to our board outside of a Downwell, so it's a free win here, and we go to 25 and 11.
It's Miss Glask, if you value your life.
Now, finally, we have reached my girl, Renata Glask. This is a deck I actually brought to the Hartford Regionals, and it's a guilty pleasure of mine, despite her being less than good. In fact, I actually have 5 entirely unique Renata decks built right now. I love cycling between them. She's just so fun. You could build her in so many different ways. Anyways, Renata is in the blue and yellow domains, and when you hold, she can be exhausted to make a gold. But if you are within 3 points of winning, your gold also generates energy on top of the power it usually makes. Her champion card, Renata Glask Mastermind, gets 2 abilities while at a battlefield. Firstly, you can pay an energy and a power to draw a card, basically letting every gold you have represent a card draw late in the game. Or you can exhaust her for 4 energy and 4 power to score an automatic point, which can be a little bit difficult to do. As for her signature spell, Hostile Takeover steals an opponent's unit at a battlefield for the rest of the turn, and it can be hidden. If they are alone when you cast this, you usually get a free point, and then you can sacrifice the card, or Hidden Blade it, or Death Grip it, to both remove the threat and get some resources that put you way ahead. Other than that, we are on a Frigid Jewel and a Sprite theme with this deck. Frigid Jewel gives 2 might to a unit whenever you draw your 2nd card each turn. This is facilitated by our champion, Stupefy, Death Grip, Hidden Blade, Consult the Past, Diana Lunari, and Hui. Speaking of which, Diana lets you pay 1 energy whenever she enters a showdown to look at the top card of your deck and choose to either keep it there or recycle it. Then you can reveal the top card, and if it's a spell, you draw it. As for Hui, every time he moves, you draw 1 and then discard 1 card to get different effects. If you pitch a unit, he gets 3 might. A spell lets you draw, and a gear lets you ready 2 runes. The other way to draw is to sacrifice sprites to the Duskrose Lab, as we've seen in a couple decks so far, and we're able to make sprites by using Sprite Fountain, Sprite Burst, or by moving Lillia. With that though, let's go crocodile hunting. Renekton somehow misses a turn 1 play despite being Renekton, and we get an early conquer with a Plundering Poro, allowing us to make a gold, as well as a Sprite Fountain to conquer the other side. They get a Profiteer out on their turn, essentially doing nothing, and on hold we get a card draw and make a gold. The value machine is running strong, and we reconquer the lab with another Sprite, pull the Poro back, and hide a Consult the Past, while accelerating Lillia in at the Dusk Lab and pulling her away from it to leave another Sprite behind there. Lillia is a bit of a weird card, but I do like her quite a lot. Regardless, they call out a Renekton and a Seal, and the Seal is a bit of a touchy subject. I don't catch it until later, but my opponent thinks that the Seal channels him a rune rather than making him a power. It's fine, though.
Time for a Bandle City beatdown.
Now with that said, we are on a dominant run lately, and it's about time we lose, so let's get into Rumble. I have never played a game of Rumble before that I can think of, so let's see what we're working with. Rumble is a blue and red legend that gives your mechs shield 1. As you might imagine, the deck is all about mech synergy. He has 2 champion cards, both which I like quite a lot, the first of which lets you sacrifice a unit to revive a mech from your trash at a discount whenever he conquers, and the other gives your mechs 1 might and makes a 3 might mech whenever you hold with him. Continuing on with the mechs, and we have Forecaster, who gives your mechs vision, Gem Jammer, who gives your units ganking, Bubblebot, who readies a mech when you play it, Production Surge creates a mech token and draws you a card, as well as getting a discount if you already have a mech out, and Breakneck Mech enters ready if you have a mech out, as well as giving your mechs deflect and ganking. It's just slivers. At the top end we have Plaza Guardian, while at the bottom we have Porobot. both care about having gear, so I built around Hextech Formula and Questionable Tome, as well as Rage Amplifier for a small empowered gear sub-theme. I don't think this is the best way to play the deck, but it's pretty fun. Anyways, let's talk about our Rumble games. And I was struggling. We match into a Kennen, then an Ambessa, and then a Diana. In each case, I just had a really hard time finding enough resources or time to develop. There's not really too much to say, but the empowered gear stuff just feels super clunky and bricky, but once I commit to a meme deck, I gotta win with it, and game 4 matches us into an Akali. We get a solid starting hand here, and they start slow with a Mask of Foresight, giving us a free conquer and a hold. Nope, Shuriken flip, and the Akali champion clears that out, and he steals the battlefield back. Luckily, we have Cleave and a longsword to take her out, and this seems to be all they had available, as killing Akali causes our opponent to rage quit. This is a pretty quick game, but again, the deck kind of does what it's supposed to here, and the opponent was just out of resources, so I don't know if she can come back from it. Who's to say? Regardless, at 4 games in, I'm not going to argue with a win, and we go to 27-14.
Kings come and go, but gold stays.
And the last Spirit Forge legend is going to be Sivir, a purple and orange legend who can generate a gold whenever you recycle a rune by exhausting her. And if you kill an enemy unit, you can ready her as well, allowing you to use the effect again. Her champion is kinda cool, having Accelerate and gaining 2 might and ganking if you've paid 2 or more power that turn. This is our Aurora deck for the set, mostly because I wanted to test out Wildclaw, a spell from Vendetta that lets you look at the top 5 cards and play a card for 5 energy discount. I've tried this in a couple decks at this point, and from what I've seen, it's just too slow. I'm not really a big fan of it. Anyways, what are we grabbing with Aurora? Well, obviously we're doing Elder Dragon, Mind Splitter, and Baron, because they're all nuts. Otherwise, we ramp with Treasure Trove, Mobilize, and Catalyst, we recycle and revive units with Last Rite and Heedless Resurrection, and we power draw with Stacked Deck, Scryer's Bloom, and Lunar Boon. Finally, we also run Punch First because Baron typically just needs to be run over by the opponent, and they are never really expecting a 5 might boost in this deck specifically. Now our first game is into an Ornn, and we are just completely unable to draw Aurora until the opponent is already holding at 7 points. And only after we use too many runes that turn to actually play it. I've said it before and I'll say it again, you live by the dazzle, you die by the dazzle. Game 2 is into an Ambessa, and that goes much more smoothly. We open with a Treasure Trove and a turn 2 Catalyst, and following that we play a Scryer's Bloom and a stacked deck into a Last Rites, and finally develop a Sivir into our base. As for our opponent, they haven't gotten much going yet, just having a Fey Folk and an empowered Ambessa out. He uses Challenge to take out my Sivir and then readies the Fey to conquer the other battlefield. With that, Aurora comes out, bringing us to an Elder Dragon and killing his Fey Folk. Unfortunately, we can't kill the Ambessa with it though. On their turn, a Profiteer removes and then returns the Ambessa's championed empowered status, which empowers their legend. I don't know if that can actually happen or not, but we allow it either way. We're not really sure how much of the mechanics in this set work. This was like day 1, day 2 of the set. Regardless, they pull everything back. On my turn, Scryer's Bloom draws us into a stacked deck, which draws us into a Treasure Trove, allowing us to get that engine going with a Pack of Wonders. Finally, we drop a Last Rites before the Aurora grabs a Mind Splitter. She has some decent stuff, and I choose to get rid of the Nidalee since it's a draw option, and I'd rather limit their possibilities as much as I can. Regardless, they draw into a Kinku Initiate anyways, get an extra draw, and then conquer before developing units in base. On my turn, I drop Baron and swing into the Initiate with the Mind Splitter, while Elder Dragon goes to the other battlefield, bringing us to 3 points and forcing him to hopefully make some rough trades. Aurora gets us another Elder and we pass back, and another Initiate comes out on their side while the opponent boosts their Profiteer by 6 with an Onslaught, allowing them to trade with the Mind Splitter. However, while Ambessa is safe from getting pinged, she still can't push the unit forward or they'll have nothing to work with. We hold the 5, equip the Last Rites to our Elder in base before conquering, and I don't actually want to use it here, I just want to have a Resurrection available on the following turn to go alongside the Heedless Resurrection in hand. We pass back and they run into Baron with an Onslaught, boosted Initiate, as well as an ambushing Nidalee. However, a Punch First on Baron completely overwhelms them and wins us the game. A massive thank you to Ali for selling me on this card in Aurora Sivir. It was absolutely the difference maker here. Regardless, with a win and a loss, we go to 28-15 to end the Spirit Forge run. Alright, let's talk Spirit Forge. I had a bit more of a rough time getting through these legends as I did in comparison to the Origin set. I think a lot of that's going to come down to just familiarity. There's a bunch of these characters I've just never really played with or just had like 1 or 2 games in passing. never really sat down to like grind them all out. And a big part of that is that I spent so much time playing Irelia. And like you saw in this video, I actually went back for an extra game because the first one was too short. I love that deck. That said, there were a couple standouts that were a little bit more difficult than I thought they would be to get wins. Rumble taking 4 games was pretty rough. I understand he's not a fantastic deck, but that's a lot, right? And again, could be pilot error, could just be bad deck building, like whatever it is, right? Aurora, obviously with Sivir, I just drew really poorly into the first game and they were very aggressive. I couldn't keep up the pace. That sucked. Azir and Ezreal were both decks that surprised me for how difficult those were. I thought I would be better at those decks. Ezreal I had never played before, so that's sure. But I thought that all the time I spent playing Diana would maybe like translate a little bit. It didn't. That deck feels really strange and awkward to me. I'm not sure what I'm trying to do with it, so maybe I gotta experiment there a bit more. And Lucian, also a little bit difficult, but I think that's fair. Notably, there were a lot of really cool decks in this set as well that I had a ton of fun with. Like I said, Irelia was great. Draven and Ornn were surprisingly fun to play around with, and both Renata and Fiora I had a ton of fun playing. So while I think that I jive less with a lot of these decks than I do with the Origins counterparts, I do really enjoy the ones that I like in this group. If Origins had a standard of like a 7 out of 10 for me, then the decks I like in this set were like 8s or 9s, and the ones I disliked tended to be like 4s and 5s. So it's a lot more divided in that way, but I think that there's such a cool design space to play around with in this set that I'm very happy we got to play around with it. Either way, let's get on to Unleashed.
A new moon is rising.
And with that, we have reached Unleashed, probably my favorite expansion the game has had so far. And we're going to be starting off with my second favorite champion of all time, Diana. She is in the purple and blue domains and has the ability to give us 1 energy during a showdown by exhausting her. This gives us a surprising amount of reach throughout a game and actually can make a massive difference in just about every turn. We've already talked about her champion a little bit, Diana Lunari, but basically with the legend she's more or less free and is a crazy draw engine for spells in the deck. We of course also have her signature spell, Moonfall. This is an action speed charm that pulls an enemy unit to a battlefield where you have units and then lowers the might of all enemy units there by 2. This is an absolute nuke. The deck in general really benefits from cheap spells, so we have things like Gust, Stack Deck, Stupefy, Flash, and Hard Bargain, as well as Ride the Wind, which become super easy to play with your legend, and all of them boost up your Ravenbloom student or anyone on the Abandoned Hall. The superstar of the deck, though, is easily Hui, who generates just so much card advantage. As for Vendetta cards, our only new inclusion is going to be Mel, who gives us a card draw, and when empowered, can also make it so our spells can't be countered, and so our minus effects like Stupefy and Moonfall are just a little bit stronger. Now, I did have a bit of a mishap on recording here. I actually won a game without hitting record. It was super intense and extremely back and forth against an Ambessa, and it's pretty upsetting to have it gone, but we're gonna run it back. This time we find a Shen. We each just develop on our own early on. I get a Tide Turner at the hall, while Diana is in my base. Meanwhile, he sets up a Poro and a Shen, as well as a Witness and a Hidden card at the fortified position. Now, I snipe the Shen with a Wages of Pain before it can activate its shield ability, and then I pull the Tide Turner out of the battlefield so I can move Diana into it, creating a new showdown and triggering her ability for a potential draw. He plays more Poros on his turn, so I use Fizz to return the Wages and kill the Affectionate Poro as well, and give us a second gold token in the process. He sets up a Tasty Feyfolk in base, not accelerated, and we continue the game of passing back and forth, knowing that I'm up a point in the hold race. He eventually does swing in with the Feyfolk, so I use Diana to check for a spell, finding a Hard Bargain, and then Starcross my Fizz and the Tasty to end the fight. He defies it, so I play 3 Stupefies, lowering his Tasty by 3, while boosting Diana thanks to the battlefield. On their side, they drop a Yuumi and a Sona and pass it back, and at this point, we're just coming down to whether or not he has a Shen or an Ahri to score extra points. But I solve that problem by dropping a Baron and gaining an extra Conquer. After which, I pull Diana to safety and move in a Tide Turner while hiding another at its location. There isn't much else the Shen is able to do here, and we hold to 8 for an easy win. What is not easy, though, is Ivern.
You look just like my friend Daisy.
I've only ever played Ivern at a pre-release event, and this was very difficult for me. He's in the yellow and green colors and allows you to replace any battlefield that you conquer or hold with a token that boosts the might of all birds, cats, dogs, poros, and Ivern units. He's kind of like a more broad rumble. His champion unit gives himself one of these tags when he is played, and then when he conquers or holds, you get an extra point if you have all 4 tags present. So let's break down what we have for each. For cats, we have the new Steel Paws, a 0 might unit that can be empowered for 7 energy and gain 7 might when it does. We also have a tank unit in Mutated Mouser, an Alpha Wildclaw to protect our small units, Yuumi, who gives another unit tank and shield 3, and Frisky Hunter, who makes a bird token. Speaking of birds, Crimson Pigeon gains might while attacking with another unit, Astral Heron discounts your second card while it's at a battlefield each turn, and Flurry of Feathers is a counterspell that can instead make 4 bird tokens. For dogs, we have the trusty Ramhound, who gets 1 might while it's with another unit, and for poros, we have Shield with Stalwart Poro and Card Draw with the Affectionate Poro. Also, we have a Blitz in the deck to help with some removal. I just think he's really fun, and I don't get to play around with him too much, so I threw him in here. Outside of that though, we have our typical green support spells with a few new additions. Block is a hidden spell that can be flipped to give a unit shield 3 and tank. Meditate lets us exhaust a unit to draw 2. Key Barrier blocks 7 damage, and Grand Stratagem gives all of our units 5 might at action speed. The nicest part of Ivern though is running bad battlefields. Remember, when you conquer, you can turn them into a brush, which often lets you dodge negative effects like Vault of Hellia or Forbidding Wastes, while your opponent might have to deal with them. Anyway, into the games, and yikes. An Ambessa and a LeBlanc completely outvalue me. I find this deck really runs out of steam pretty quick if you're behind, and has a hard time catching up in that situation. The LeBlanc in particular made use of that new gear that turns one unit into another, and just flooded the board with Ruined Rexes. But eventually we find a Shen for game 3, which seems to be our Hail Mary matchup. They set up a Witness and a Shen on the fortified position, and I head over to Hellia, turn it into a brush, and develop a cat and some birds there. From here we both play the waiting game, and the following turn has me setting up a dog, almost filling out our requirements. We can skip ahead here a bit to turn 4. They now have a Sona and a Yuumi, while I get out the Ivern marked as a Poro, completing the set. This means that we are now holding for 2 points. To defend against any major problems, I also hide a back off, and we're now in a winning position. They unfortunately can't really do anything about that on their turn, and we pretty much guarantee the win here as we have a counterspell in hand, a stun hiding, and even a grand stratagem if needed. If that wasn't enough, soon we also have an empowered Steel Paws in base, and that gets them to drop the game. Finally moving on from one of the only 2 decks that I think is going to be a real problem for me throughout Unleashed, with a current score of 30 and 18.
4!
But would you look at that, the second problem child of the set is here with Jhin. He is the red and blue legend for Unleashed, rewarding you for playing spells that cost 4 or more. Whenever you do, you can banish them, and once you have 4 banished, you get to draw 1 card, return the banished cards to the trash, and channel 4 readied runes. It's basically a big reset that can put you a bit ahead. His champion card isn't super relevant this time around, having vision and letting you play him for a power if you've cast a spell that costs 4 or more this turn. And his signature spell is interesting, I guess. It costs 4 and has a modular ability depending on how many times you want to repeat it. And with each repeated effect, it costs a little bit more to do that, but you have 4 distinct options to choose from. The options are draw 1, deal 2 damage to a unit at a battlefield, deal 3 damage to a unit at a base, or give a unit -4 might at a battlefield until the end of the turn. The deck is a little bit weird, and I made it particularly hard on myself by trying a deck I've never explored before, Gutter Palace. And on top of that, we are all blue in this deck. If you don't know, Gutter Palace is an alt win condition that says that if you have exactly 4 cards in hand and 4 units at battlefields at the start of your turn, you win the game. And notably this happens before you draw for turn. It's in the beginning phase. Now that sounds pretty hard to do, but the Palace does help you out a little bit with its activated ability, letting you exhaust it to discard 1 and make a bird token. The deck is basically all removal, stall, and draw from here. For removal, we have Deadly Flourish, Falling Comet, and Unchecked Power. For draw, we have Downstage Dramatics, which draws 1 or can be repeated to draw 2. Consult the Past, Progress Day, and Clairvoyance, a reaction speed spell that lets you predict through the top 5 cards of your deck before drawing 2. As for stall, we have a neat little combo with Brynhir Thundersong, who is a unit who stops your opponent from playing cards for the rest of the turn, and Temporal Breach, which can be hidden to replay him during your opponent's turn at reaction speed. And the final stall card is going to be Time Warp to take an extra turn. We also have resource tools like Energy Conduit to make an energy, or Hextech Anomaly to make extra power. So we queue up into a Nasus, which is kinda nice since it's a bit of a slower deck. He sets up a Steel Paws in base, I pop it with a Flourish. However, I do forget he has Deflect, so I miss out on playing my Seal beforehand, which does put me behind. Oops. Like I said, these are day 1 games. On top of that, the spell gets defied, so we are off to a very bad start. He conquers the Paper Tree, which at the very least will give us some of the runes back in the future if he does hold, and I commit to the removal bit by setting up some seals and dropping a Comet on the cat. Is it overkill? Yeah, but I need to buy myself some time. They skip their next turn, letting us get a free progress day and banishing our second card with our legend, as well as developing the Jhin champion for basically free thanks to the seal. He plays his champion as well, and on our next turn I get the Gutter Palace out and a Hextech Anomaly before discarding to make a bird. He empowers his Nasus and conquers the Sunken Temple to both draw a card and get 2 points, and then charms in my Jhin to take it out. Back to me, and I drop in a Brynhir in base, hoping to set him up with a Temporal Breach next turn. Now, Brynhir also has a secret second ability, which is that when you play him, your opponent panics because they expect you to do some big play. So my opponent here plays a Discipline for literally no reason. With that, I play Consult the Past, banishing our third spell and drawing 2 cards before making another bird. He then pulls Nasus away and sets up some more empowered fellas in base, and we draw into our third Time Warp. I play 1, triggering the Jhin Legend, netting us 4 runes and drawing a card. And remember, these runes come in readied and not exhausted, which is pretty nice. Either way, now I just need to get down to 4 cards to win, so I make a bird, which is our 4th unit, and then play an Energy Conduit and pass. But you see, I am stupid and bad. Gutter Palace needs my units to be at a battlefield, which my opponent points out here, and then he calls me dumb for misplaying and says I should get good and read my cards. Now, he is correct, but I don't know about saying that to a stranger. Either way, I move up my boys. He allows me to conquer there and doesn't have any cards in response, and so I play another Time Warp. And he goes, no, wait, actually I wanted to play a Bellows Breath, which I would have allowed, but shucks, I'm just too dumb to let it happen. Which causes him to rage quit, and we go up to 31 and 18.
Consume and adapt.
Now, time for some Bugman action. Kha Zix is the purple and orange legend for the set and has the ability to give us an XP whenever we win a combat. You can also exhaust him and pay 1 XP to buff one of your units, or pay 2 XP to pull an exhausted unit out of battlefield back to your base. It makes him very versatile. His champion is also pretty cool, with Kha Zix Mutating Horror being a 4 might unit with ambush, and if he attacks or defends into an isolated unit, he gets 2 might for the rest of the turn and we get 2 experience. And finally, his signature spell, Void Assault, lets us move one of our units and then an enemy unit. This is really interesting as it's kind of a hybrid of Charm and Ride the Wind at a slow speed. Now this deck is a lot of the classic purple and orange power cards, but we also have a few other cool ones as well, like Grim Resolve, which is a battle trick that gives us 3 might and then rewards us for 2 XP if we win a combat with that unit for the rest of the turn. Shadow Ordered Disciple lets us burn a card whenever he moves to give 1 might. Tailcloaked Matriarch can revive a low-cost unit from our trash when empowered, namely Fizz, Lucian, and maybe the Fae, and we're going to be running a Vex Apathetic to stun and immobilize our opponent's units for the turn they get played. Outside of that, we're just some punchy boys this game. We run into an Ahri who sets up on the Kinku Temple, so I'm expecting a kind of interesting deck. She starts with a Poro and sets up a Sona for the following turn. So I send my Merchant to Zon, cycling twice and dropping a Vex onto the board. Sona represents a big problem for us, but we do have some answers, as both Fae Folk and Void Assault can bring her to us. But we might have bigger problems, as they put out a Blue Sentinel as well, a card which doubles their hold triggers and can be a big problem. So I go for a Sabotage to check what they're working with, and they react by putting a Cloth Armor on Sona. After which, we get a glimpse of yet another Sona and an Ahri in hand, but luckily that means there's no other spells that we have to contest with, so I use Void Assault, pushing Kha Zix into Zon, and then pulling the Sentinel in to attack him. We get the isolated boost, kill it, and then net some XP that we use to buff the bug. On her turn, they draw a Lecturing Yordle and pass back to us. We do some very slow math, but unfortunately I decide to just drop Fizz, reusing the Void Assault in our base to repeat the last turn's game plan and kill Sona. Unfortunately, now they have a not-so-fast which stops us. So I set up a Fey Folk and pass it back to them after buffing the Vex. She drops yet another Sona, and I set up Kha Zix at Zon to cycle a card. I then Fey Folk in the equipped Sona to kill her, and then Void Assault Vex and their Ahri into the battlefield as well. With that, I can buff and punch first on Fizz and swing into his battlefield alongside the Merchant, forgetting that the Poro has a shield and losing the fight. But I cleared out his Sona and the Yordle, so it could have been worse. Nope, actually it couldn't have been. I had to discard the Matriarch to move the Merchant, which could have looped a Fizz and the Void Assault and gotten us super far ahead. Anyways, they develop a Student and another Sentinel and pass it back, and I pull all of my units out and drop a Rengar in base alongside them, giving him a buff and passing back to the opponent. He finds a tank cat and plays Ahri alongside her, and we are desperate here, but luckily I draw into a stacked deck and find a Rebuke. This lets us bounce her Sentinel back to hand, and with that, everyone runs in and the bug gets Grim resolved. Luckily, our buffs effectively negate the Ahri legend, and we barely make it over with 17 might to her 15, and in the end they choose to leave Vex alive, kind of guaranteeing that they can't win with the Watcher if they draw it. They play the Sentinel, I draw into the Fizz, use a Void Assault, and win the game by moving in the Fizz and sending his Sentinel to fight the Vex. So, despite making a massive couple mistakes in this game, we still got there and our end score goes to 32-18.
The black rose shall bloom once more.
With that, we move on to LeBlanc, the yellow and blue legend for Unleashed, who has a crazy ability. Anytime you conquer or hold, you can exhaust her and discard one to create a readied temporary copy of a unit at that location. So the name of the game tends to be to copy units with death knells, as well as copying the death knells themselves. LeBlanc's signature spell, Mirror Image, is basically the same effect, except you can copy any unit on the entire board, including your opponent's. As for her chosen champion, when she dies, you can draw a card, or if she dies in the beginning phase, like if she was a temporary copy, then you get to draw 2. So let's go over our death triggers. It's mostly going to be similar to the Darius deck, but we have a couple cool additions as well. Honest Broker makes us a gold, Soaring Scout and Black Rose Dignitary channel a rune, Watchful Sentry draws a card, and Rift Herald plays any unit from our hand while ignoring the energy cost. But the two most important ones are going to be Glask Mixologist, who revives a low-cost unit when he dies, and Ruin Rex, who deals 6 damage to anything when it dies. Doubling up on these effects with clones is kinda crazy strong, and to even further the doubling, we also have Kha Zix, who makes our death knells trigger an additional time. We do also have a couple pretty cool Vendetta adds to this deck, my favorite of which is Shady Spectacles. This is an equipment that turns a unit into a copy of another unit. So let's say you don't need to channel another rune because we're pretty late in the game, well you can turn your Soaring Scout into a copy of Ruin Rex instead, problem solved. We also have Temporal Breach to banish and replay a unit. This can be used defensively to get rid of any boosts that an attacking unit might have, or their buffs, or their empowered status, or to flicker a Thousand Tail Watcher or Harness Dragon. It's extremely versatile in this deck. Basically, the name of the game is to generate as much value as we can, as fast as we can, and overwhelm the opponent with death triggers. We queue into an Ornn, and we start off on the Windswept Hillock, a nuke of a battlefield with LeBlanc. This gives the units their ganking, and since all of the copies we make come in ready, they can instantly move to the other battlefield, essentially meaning that every conquer represents 2 points as a result. And that's even worse because I get to go first. We set up a sentry on turn 1, and they miss their 2-drop. Karthus comes out on our second turn, and I swing in with the sentry, and they quit. Okay, let's run it back. This time we're into an infinite combo Lux, and they're going first, which checks out. Everything sucks. Either way, they set up a Forge, and I play my Bird, and on their second turn, they conquer and call the weak, letting me channel a rune. Meaning when it's my turn, I can play a Sentinel and LeBlanc to base. They pass with all their energy up, and I go into conquer, but they just Wages of Pain to kill LeBlanc. I take the card draw and try to conquer with the sentry, but he hidden blades it and I draw 3 more cards. So with 90 cards in my hand at this point and some extra runes, I get greedy, making an Honest Broker and mirror imaging it to make a clone. That clone then conquers the Hillock, so I clone it again and move it to the Wastes. You may be thinking that is way too aggressive, but if I give Lux any breathing room, they will combo off and win the game. So conservatively, I have like 4 more turns to win this before that happens, and I have to be greedy as a result. She plays another Forge and her Lux champion, and all of my copies die, making us 2 gold when my turn starts. I play a Mixologist and once again conquer, copy, conquer, and pass. Seeing my Mixologist, they actually use their Forge to recycle all of my low-cost units in the trash, which is super smart and very frustrating. They then Sprite Burst, drawing from Lux and conquering both battlefields with the Sprite, and with the Broker now in the trash, they use the Forge to remove her as well. Back to me, and with no targets for Mixologist, I choose to initiate with something else instead and accelerate in a Thousand Tail Watcher. That gets drag undered, so Mixie goes in anyways. I conquer, copy, and conquer, but the discard that I used for the copy was a Watchful Sentry, giving the Mixologist a target. They drag under the real Mixologist, I bring back the Watcher, and they comet the remaining Mixologist, netting a card draw as well. With that, they conquer in with their Recruit, which is too big for my Sentry to kill, but ambushing in a Vi lets me take the game, which is super gross. LeBlanc brings us to a total of 33 and 18.
Me? A dream come true.
Oh dear, it's time for Lillia. She is the blue and green legend for Unleashed and has the ability to pay for energy and exhaust herself to create a readied sprite token. But this costs 1 less for every temporary unit you have out. This is pretty comparable to Viktor in that you always have units available, but there is a notable upside and downside to the deck. On the one hand, they enter ready and they are 3 might, but on the other, they disappear after the turn is done. As for her signature spell, we have Lilting Lullaby, a counterspell that makes it so your opponent can't play any other spells after you use it for the rest of the turn. This is very powerful depending on the matchup. Now, we are super leaning into the temporary theme for this deck. Again, a bit too much, probably leaning into meme territory, definitely leaning into meme territory, and we're picking some weaker options to make that theme more fleshed out. Namely, LeBlanc Everywhere at Once, who makes your temporary effects not trigger at her battlefield, as well as Lillia, Protector of Dreams, who gives your temporary units tank. Basically, we're going to make a wall of these idiots to protect us, and I wanted to go so far that we even include Zillion, who, if he's at a battlefield, will double your first token creation each turn. So, how do we get these tokens? Well, aside from our legend, we have Sprite Fountain, which makes 1 immediately and 1 the following turn. Sprite Call can make 1 in base or be hidden. Trevor Snoozebottom makes 1 when we hold, and double that with Blue Sentinel. And we also have Sprite Burst, which makes 2, as well as the Sprite Queen, who makes 1 each turn. Then we have some temporary support. Petal Pixie gets +1 might for each temporary unit at her battlefield. Smoke and Mirrors is a Tide Turner effect that lets you draw a card if one of the targets was temporary, which is pretty huge with the blue Lillia. Heart of Dark Ice gives a unit +3 might for the rest of the turn, making these idiots swing pretty hard. And Thousand Tail Watcher lowers the opponent's might so we can actually run them over. Oh, and obviously Dusk Rose Lab allows us to sacrifice a sprite before the temporary trigger kills them, which draws us a card. We also have one of the best interactions with Unchecked Power. This deals 12 damage to all units at battlefields and then exhausts all of your units. But you can play this, then summon a sprite for free with your legend and conquer most of the time. Lillia queues into Zed and we miss our turn 1 because we don't get any blue runes for the fountain, which happens more than you would think. Turn 2 we drop our Lillia champion and the Zed begins building up their trash by conquering the minefield. He actually burns a Vex Apathetic, which is the single biggest counter to my deck, so that is huge for us. After which, he drops his champion just like we did. I swing Lillia up to the lab, then play a Sentinel to defend her, hiding a back off as well. This works out great as he boosts his Zed with a Gust Monk and overcommits by cleaving on top of that, swinging in for 10 just to be stunned and pushed away. With that, he pulls his other units back and plays a Death Mark to make a Shadow Clone, importantly burning some solid units and removal for us. For anyone who plays Zed out there, do you like this deck? I don't get it. Either way, I make 2 power with the Sentinel, pull Lillia away to make a sprite, and charm his Zed into die. Sprite Fountain makes us another sprite, as does our legend, and we stack them on the Dusk Rose Lab in hopes of 1 surviving so we can draw. On their turn, Fizz comes down and uses Death Mark once again, and he conquers the minefield to burn even more cards. He then uses another Fizz to play Shadows from the Past to return 2 units from his trash to his hand. Back to me, and I draw by sacking my sprite and making another with the Fountain. I use it to conquer the minefield and burn my green Lillia, unfortunately. That is a 1-of in the deck, so we don't get to see it. Zillion then comes down, and I make 2 sprites with another Fountain, although I think that might be cheating. One moment. Nope, okay. So when I explained Zillion earlier, I said the first token we made could be cloned each turn if it was at a battlefield. I was wrong. Zillion allows you to copy 1 per turn. It doesn't have to be the first, which allows this to work. Either way, I make 2 sprites with our Fountain, bringing us up to 3 temporary units and letting us play another for just 1 energy with our legend. I stacked them all on the Dusk Rose Lab and pass to Zed. They finally get a Rasa out, and they boost up their Shadow Clones with Assault to trade with my Zillion and Sprite. He once again conquers the minefield and plays another Death Mark before ending his turn. Dusk Rose draws for me, and I play and empower a Helm of Suppression to make all of his spells more expensive. I take back the Minefield, and this time burn a Sona and a LeBlanc. Again, the units I wanted to test this deck out with. Either way, finally I move in Lillia to the lab and conquer to 6, as well as making another token. That discounts my legend enough to make a sprite that can go in and defend with her, and on Zed's turn they conquer the Minefield again with a Shadow Clone, before trading his Rasa for both of my units at the lab. Then Fizz goes into Conquer and gets supported by a Forerunner. Unfortunately for him, I top deck a Watcher who runs into Conquer for free, and my Sentinel goes to the other side for game, bringing us to a total of 34 and 18 at this point.
You wish to learn the hard way, I see.
Next up is a deck that I think gets a lot of unnecessary slander. XP Master Yi is the retrain of the old Master Yi in the same colors, and as a result, it's often compared to it pretty harshly. However, as a reminder, the old Master Yi is arguably one of the best legends ever printed, so putting this against it might not be the best comparison. And honestly, on its own, I think that it's fine, maybe a little bit on the low end, but not as bad as people say. But where this comparison comes from, and we saw the same thing with Lee Sin, is that as it turns out, the orange and green legends, aside from Jax, kinda, all just boost stats a little bit. But where XP Yi is special is that it does nothing. At least not at first. You have to stack up XP, and when you have 6, he gives all of your units a static 1 might boost. Once you have 11 XP, then they all enter ready as well. Both of these effects are crazy strong on their own, but until they're active, you don't really have a legend, and that's the biggest drawback of this deck. On top of that, unlike Poppy or Kha Zix, this Yi doesn't have a built-in way to generate XP. So let's talk about how we actually do that. One way is through spells, like Grim Resolve or Master Yi's signature spell Alpha Strike, which has a friendly unit split their might as damage into enemies at a battlefield. Then, for each one killed, you get 1 XP. We also have Concentrate, which is a spell that gets cheaper based on your XP and draws 2 cards. As for units that give XP, we are largely using the Hunt mechanic. Basically, if a unit has Hunt, they get an XP when they hold or conquer. Gemhand Hunter and Wuju Apprentice both have Hunt, and the latter even draws you a card if it gets played when you have 6 XP already. Master Yi Tempered, our chosen champion, has Hunt 2, and when you're at 6 XP, gains Deflect and Ganking. Then we have our big boy, Gromp, who has a massive Hunt 3. So if Gromp conquers and holds, you already hit 6 XP on your own, and all of your units get a 1 might boost, which is pretty okay. Now, 2 other units also give us XP. Scuttlecrab, who draws a card when it enters, also has the death knell to look at your opponent's hand and hidden cards when it dies, but it has a hidden bonus here that doesn't usually come up, that it gives you 1 XP. And finally, we also put in a Poppy in this deck, who has Deflect and will give you 3 XP if your opponent is within 3 points of winning, which could get you over the edge if you're too far behind. Our last unit is going to be Master Yi Unstoppable, a monstrous 12 energy 3 power unit with 12 might. However, they become cheaper by 2 energy and a power at levels 3, 6, and 11, and they can't be chosen by enemy effects once you're at level 16. Otherwise, this deck is just normal orange and green stuff. We find ourselves in a match against a Shen and get a crazy starting hand. I play a Scuttlecrab, and I actually bait them into their own battlefield by sending Scuttlecrab that way, knowing that the Poro will be able to get a draw if they fight the Scuttlecrab, since the crab has no might. And with the bait being set, I play Master Yi to my base. They actually go for the crab and kill it, netting themselves 1 draw. However, I net myself an XP here. And I get to look at their hand, which is basically nothing to worry about outside of a Defy and a Key Barrier. So they also play a Witness and then they pass. On my turn, I send my Yi to the other battlefield, getting 2 XP for his Hunt ability, bringing us up to 3, and then play a Gromp here as well. Now back to Shen, and he drops a Dignitary and plays a hidden card before pulling his Witness back. But unfortunately for him, the battlefield that I'm on pretty much wins me the game here. You see, Reckoner's Arena makes your Conquer effects happen when you hold as well. Conquer effects like Hunt. So at the start of the turn, Yi gets us 4 XP rather than just 2, and Gromp gives us 6, for a total of a 10 XP boost, bringing us to 13, activating both stages of our legend. So I play Wuju Apprentice, he gets +1 and readied, and draws me a card, and I run him in alongside Yi, who now has ganking. The hidden card was Resonating Strike, pulling his Dignitary back in, and he drops a Discipline. However, I play Grim Resolve, trying to bait his Defy. He does in fact take the bait once again, allowing me to play yet another Grim Resolve from hand, running over his unit. Here I hide it back off and Azonia's, and there's just no coming back at this point, so my opponent gives us the GG and leaves the match. I cannot believe how well this game went. I didn't realize that Reckoner's Arena would be that strong in this deck. It was one of the biggest blowouts in this entire video. Either way, 35-18.
The hammer isn't mine, just keeping it until the real guy shows up.
Our last XP legend for the set is going to be Poppy in yellow and orange. Poppy has the ability to give you 1 XP whenever you hold, and lets you spend 3 XP and exhaust her to draw a card. It's like an okay ability, but without the tools from some of the other XP colors, it does feel pretty limited unless you go all in on XP. I mentioned her champion unit already, but her signature spell is also pretty cool, being a stronger version of Rebuke that lets the controller choose if they want to put the unit at the top or bottom of their deck. Outside of that though, we are kinda just doing Aurora slop in this one. I haven't really tried the XP focused Poppy, so maybe I'm underestimating it like I did for Master Yi, but I find the yellow Aurora decks to just be super powerful and underrepresented. Tools like Forge of the Future and Vanguard Armory can give you access to small and consistent units without diluting your pool, and having Rift Herald, Harness Dragon, and Elder Dragon are super strong targets for the Aurora. But yellow also has great removal outside of that, with Call the Weak, Sabotage, and 2 very heavy hitters. Ruination kills all units but leaves the gear, so you can keep making tokens with the Armory or Aurora afterwards to stay on board. And even if you have to kill your own units with this, maybe your Elder Dragon for example, you can use Forge of the Future to recycle those units from the trash back into your deck so your Dazzling Aurora can hit them again going forward. The other big removal spell is Divine Judgment, a insane spell that forces both players down to just 2 units, 2 gear, 2 runes, and 2 cards in hand, recycling the rest. So trash decks lose access to all their stuff as well in a pretty big way, and if you already have an Armory down or an Aurora, you're just gonna get these units back. This is an extremely one-sided removal spell, even though it looks like it's symmetrical. And if you're keeping your Aurora and your Armory and your opponent's down to 2 runes, like what are they doing to fix this? Either way, we roll into a Kennen with a pre-mulligan hand of 2 Mobilize, a Catalyst, and an Aurora, which, quick spoilers, we win this game. Because I'm going second, I can Mobilize on turn 1, and then Mobilize and Catalyst on turn 2, and suddenly, on turn 3, we have 11 runes, drop an Aurora, and it's just free. They have a small setup and drop a Karthus in the back, which, cool as hell, but it is quickly removed by a Harness Dragon. They end up conquering to 5 on their 4th turn, drop another Karthus, and Shadows Call their Emissary, hoping to make 4 units on their following turn. On my turn, I play Wildclaw and find an Armory and start pumping out units. I then trade for the Emissary, giving him the units he wanted, and hit his Karthus with an Elder Dragon from Aurora. They conquer to 6 and pass back, so I drop my Poppy for 3 experience and a draw, trading into his Recruit with 3 of my own. And then I choose to Keeper's Verdict his token when he key barriers it. Is this greedy? Absolutely, but at this point he is very close to winning, and I don't think he'd be investing in this if he had better options. Plus, I'm kind of generating infinite value right now. I can be a little bit greedy. I fortify the battlefields, then Aurora into yet another Elder Dragon. He plays his 3rd Karthus, and I draw into Flurry of Blades, basically guaranteeing that there's no way back in the game for them. More recruits, and an Aurora into yet another Elder to kill his Karthus again, and they leave the game pretty rightfully so. This was again super gross, and we are 36-18 going into yet another of my meme decks.
My list just got longer.
Pyke is our purple and red legend for the set and has the ability to pay 1 and exhaust him to bounce a unit at a battlefield back to your hand. And when you do this, you get to make a treasure. This is usually supposed to facilitate on-play effects repeating, but I base this deck on one that I played against in the Vancouver Regionals all around Katarina, but we'll get there in a moment. Pyke's chosen champion, Pyke Dockside Butcher, can be hidden, has ganking, and allows you to pay a red power when you play him to give him 2 might for the turn and make him readied. We also run a copy of the other version of him, which again can be hidden, this time having backline, and makes you a gold whenever an enemy unit dies at his location. As for his signature spell, Death from Below, this kills a unit at a battlefield, and if the unit had 3 or less might, you can play this again from your trash for 1 power. I probably should also mention his key battlefield, Ripper's Bay. When you return a unit from there to your hand, you can pay 1 energy to channel a rune. So Pyke kind of becomes a 2 energy, bounce a friendly unit to hand, channel a rune, and make a gold legend. But let's get into our secret legend, Katarina. Kat readies herself whenever you hide a card, and when you play a card from hidden, she deals 2 damage to to any enemy. So we're just gonna hide cards so she can rush in, flip them up, and then get their effect and deal 2 damage to snipe something. We can then bounce the hidden card back to hand and hide it all over again. Ember Monk also benefits from cards being played from hidden, getting a 2 might buff for the turn, and we have a few cards that want to be played on repeat as well. Windsinger is Gust on a unit and can be hidden. Bewitching Spirit forces a discard and is our ideal bounce target if we don't have the cat cycle going. And then we also have the purple Teemo and Eve, who are just super powerful when you get their effects repeated over and over. Switcheroo is not a unit, so we can't bounce it to hand, but it is extremely powerful and allows us to swap the might of our small units for the might of one of our opponent's stronger units at the same battlefield. When used this way, it basically lets your Katarina kill any unit. For example, let's say we have a 1 might Teemo at a battlefield and use Switcheroo on their Draven. Well, Switcheroo will drop them down to 1 might, and Katarina will deal 2 damage to them, effectively being an instant kill while Teemo still gets the boost. Kinda nice. And the final card that I'm testing here is Ocean Drake, which can be played to an open battlefield to enable easy hiding. And you can return any non-dragons to its owner's hand as well, which can open some interesting opportunities and potentially help you win the game. This should be fun, so let's get into the game. We pair into a Jayce and start off with a Windsinger, which isn't exactly ideal, but we're gonna make it work. They get a Worm Egg, but I top deck an acceptable losses to get rid of it, before conquering Ripper's Bay and then bouncing the Singer to both make a gold and channel a rune, ending the turn with a stack deck into a hard bargain. On their second turn, Jayce then plays a Hextech formula and surprises me with a Repair Specialist. That's right, we are not playing into an Aurora Jayce this time, so Cat will actually have some value. On my turn, I ready a Pike, move him to Ripper's Bay, and bounce him back to hand for the channel and a gold once again. They develop into a Pit Crew and a Porobot, and a second Porobot as well. They then conquer the battlefields, and we are finally ready to pop off. I play Cat, and then a readied Pike, killing his Pit Crew and hiding a Windsinger, readying Cat, and killing their Repair Specialist as well, so I can hide a Pike there. This would basically be GG at this point, but he plays an unchecked power to wipe the board. In response, I flip the Windsinger to save Pike and use Katarina to kill a Poro. Then I flip the other Pike and kill the other Poro as well. We both basically got board wipes off, but I'm sitting with 5 cards in my hand to their 1 as they end their turn. And I top deck a Mind Splitter, making them discard their last card. On their turn, they play a Seal. I move the Mind Splitter into the bay, move in Pike to the other battlefield, and bounce the Mind Splitter to hand with our Legend. I pass back, and he plays his Jayce Champion, as well as a Porobot, but that is too little, too late at this point. Tide Turner moves Pike, and I conquer to 8 for a game. This deck is cool as hell, try it out. We hit 37 and 18 and move on to my third favorite deck, Rengar.
Tonight we hunt!
This is another really fun deck, and it's actually the one that I brought to the Ottawa event. And while I didn't do fantastic, I did do pretty positively, and I got 5 of my 7 opponents to say that my Aurora deck was cool, which I take as a personal victory. Rengar is an orange and red legend who gives 1 might to any unit whenever you play a unit. This works great with his chosen champion, the orange Rengar with Ambush, which we've seen a billion times in this video. It is super strong on its own, and this is just even better. With that though, we're going to talk about Rengar's signature spell in a moment. First, we got to talk about the Dazzling Aurora stuff. We're going to be focusing on 3 main dragons: Elder Dragon, Gentle Gem Dragon, who untaps 2 energy whenever you play a dragon, and then Cadragon, who draws a card for every mighty unit you control when you play it. All of these are amazing when you hit them on Aurora, with Elder Dragon being great removal, Cadragon netting you a card, and Gem Dragon giving you some runes to react with. But Gem Dragon in particular makes the other dragons a million times better. And you might think that 2 energy isn't all that, but then we have Thrill of the Hunt, Rengar's signature spell that makes this the best deck for the dragon list. This is a reaction speed spell that lets you banish one of your units and play them to any battlefield. So playing a Gem Dragon makes sure that this is always active. But let's say they try to kill your Elder Dragon. Well, Thrill of the Hunt makes them dodge the removal, and you get to re-trigger its on-play effect. And if you have a Gem Dragon down, you can now untap 2 more, letting you cast another Thrill of the Hunt if you have it. Or you can flicker a Cadragon for more draws. And because of that, it's not uncommon to draw 10 cards in a turn this way. Plus, if you have multiple Gem Dragons down, using a Thrill of the Hunt actually nets you positive energy. Let's say you have 3 Gem Dragons down, you pay 2 for the Thrill of the Hunt, you now untap 6, which lets you play your Rengar champion as well. The deck is crazy when it works. Now, there are some interesting choices here, and it's what got the most compliments at the Ottawa event. For example, we're playing Incinerate, a 2 energy action speed spell that deals 2 damage. Turns out, we always have 2 energy up, and if you have the Elder Dragon out, this is just hard removal. Get Excited lets you discard a card to deal damage equal to its cost to a unit at a battlefield, and we got a lot of big cards, so that's nice. Also, we can put a unit like an Elder Dragon into our trash, which we can use Assembly Rig to recycle and then create a mech token with. This card basically lets Aurora stay active forever, which is pretty nice. Another bit of a weird card is Showdown, which makes your opponent choose between a unit taking 6 damage or you drawing 2 cards. If it deals the damage, cool, you killed something. If they make you draw 2, cool, you got closer to finding Aurora. And finally, Iron Ballista is a gear that you can exhaust to hit a unit at a battlefield for 2 damage each turn. And again, if Elder Dragon is out, that means they can never hold a battlefield. On top of that, because your opponents know you're playing an Aurora list, they don't usually use their removal on your Ballista, which means you're just getting pretty much infinite value here. Adding into that, this isn't a spell, so things like Defy can't stop it. You're not triggering a battle, so your opponent's Master Yi, for example, their legend ability won't matter. You can kill all their Poros, or you can kill things like Ravenbloom Student, or Pit Rookie, or a bunch of stuff. It turns out there's a lot of 2-might units going around. I'm not going to say this deck is perfect or that it works all the time. Like I said, I only went 4-3 with it in Ottawa, but the games where it's working are just phenomenal. So we queue into a Teemo and miss out on turn 1, but our hand is kinda okay looking overall. I get excited seeing no blue runes on my opponent's side because that means they can't play a Sprite Fountain. But they do have a Sprite Call, which does the same thing, and he manages to hide a card either way. I get a Catalyst going and pass back to him, and he reveals a Teemo and hides another card, before setting up a Sprite Fountain and conquering the other battlefield as well. On my turn, I play an Incinerate to force the hidden card to be revealed, and we see a Pike turn up, so Rengar comes down and we kill it, and pass back to them. We see another Sprite come out, and he conquers once again, as well as having to hard cast a Nocturne, which I love to see. On my turn, I drop a Gem Dragon, untap some energy and pass back to them, and Nocturne conquers the Paper Tree, where he hides yet another card. I send the Gem Dragon into it, my dude is totally bluffing, and both the Nocturne and the Windsinger die as I conquer to 4 and drop an Assembly Rig. They then use a Premonition to draw 3 cards before setting out a Teemo and a Nocturne. Unfortunately for me, the tapped rune from Paper Tree comes in before my readied rune, so I'm unable to actually play the Elder Dragon from hand, which is a bit of an oopsie on my part. So I play a Confront instead, draw a card, and find the Aurora because we are simply never punished. This calls out a Kadrigan, I draw 3 and untap 2 before ending my turn with access to a Thrill of the Hunt. So they swing in with Teemo and try to switcheroo, but a Thrill of the Hunt saves the Gem Dragon, kills the Teemo, and untaps the energy. With that failed attack, they leave the game and we move up to 38-18.
This place is so getting harrowed.
We have reached the penultimate Unleash deck with Vex, the green and purple legend who can be exhausted to draw a card if you hold. Her chosen champion is one of the strongest in the game, Vex Apathetic, who we've seen in quite a few decks already. That said, we are not on her signature unit, so we can skip that for now. This deck has gotten a few changes since I've been testing it more in real life, but what we have here is based on the new card Karox. Or Karox. I don't know, we're gonna go with Karox. When this unit is empowered, your opponent burns 3, and then you can revive any unit from their trash to the field. We plan to abuse this as much as possible, firstly by attaching Spellsonger to double the effect, and second through Sanction, which is a reaction speed spell that can either empower a unit until the end of the turn, or disempower it and re-empower it at the end of the turn. This lets us trigger Karox multiple times in one turn, and we can double up if Spellsonger is there. Not only that, but Fizz can bring the spell back and loop it. Heedless Resurrection can also flicker Karox with one from your grave to dodge removal or to disempower him, and Morbid Return and Double Trouble can hopefully help you fill your hand a little bit. Finally, Invert Timelines has both players discard their hand and draw 4, giving you plenty of options for Karox to revive, hopefully. This is the most disrespectful game of the entire video by far, and that is with me working with a very nerfed understanding of this card, which we'll talk about in a minute. So, we're into a Nasus who skips their first turn, and on my turn I play a stack deck and drop a Pack of Wonders. They set up Steel Paws and pass, so I use Pack of Wonders and Treasure Trope to start ramping and drawing. They conquer and pass, giving us plenty of time, and I continue ramping as I set up a Vex and find my center. This sets us up to having 12 runes next turn, and we're ready to go. The Steel Paws gets empowered, and a card gets hidden alongside it as my opponent passes. I push my Vex in, and drop Karox next to her, immediately hitting it with a Sanction to empower it. So they burn 3 and we bring back a crab for a draw and some information gathering. We then pass back and Karox disempowers itself at the end of the turn. He tries to hit Karox with a siphoning strike, so I defy it and he passes. I then hard cast the empower for Karox, taking a steel paw, and then star-cross Karox and his cat, letting Scuttle conquer that battlefield. We ramp a little bit with the treasure trove and send it back after drawing a Spellsonger. He develops into a Nasus and repeats a Bellow Breath to kill my 0 might units, though it seems we missed the cat's deflect cost. Either way, we get to see his hand, and there are a few battle tricks in there that I now know to play around. Importantly though, there is no counterspell. So Karox comes out and I play a Spellsonger before passing to them. Nasus then gets empowered and I Starcross it and Vex back to hand. Yes, I need to pay deflect too, but he's sunk 16 energy into this thing, so that's a fair trade. Afterwards, 2 Steel Paws come out on their side and a Premonition draws them 3. I attach Spellsonger, then empower Karox, milling 6 and reviving 2. I take his Astral Heron, and this is where the nerf comes in. I didn't realize that Karox could revive anything and thought it was just out of the 3 cards I milled. So I don't revive the crab that he has. I don't know, man, these are new cards, like I said. Regardless, I use the Pack of Wonders thing to ramp a little bit and send it back to them. Nasus comes out once again, and his cats double conquer, putting him to 5, and this gets me excited because I can remove the Zonias by killing a cat. But he then Emperor's divides one out, and here comes the disrespect. I draw in to invert timelines. So I conquer with Karox and the Heron, and he retreats the cat, leaving no energy remaining, which lets me use Fizz into a Starcross, bouncing the Nasus and the Fizz back to hand, and then replay the Fizz to use Sanction to disempower Karox. Finally, I play invert timelines, making him discard 9 cards and putting both a Nasus and a Heron into his trash for me to revive when the Karox re-empowers itself at the end of the turn. At least, you know, if I knew how the card worked properly. Either way, he's going to be drawing 4 here and then milling 6 when the turn ends. This leaves him with just 2 cards in deck, and I actually opt to take the Scuttle and the Fox because, again, I was misreading the card. They play their own Fox Accelerated, kill Karox, and then throw up the GG as there's just nothing left they can do after that. Again, one of my favorite decks. It got much better when I knew what the card actually did, but even here it was fantastic. You do need to be into certain opponents. I've played into like a Mel, for example. You're going to have a bad time there. But if you find like a heavy unit deck, it's going to be great. Regardless, that brings us to 39 and 18.
Punch first. Ask questions while punching.
And our last Unleashed legend is Vi in yellow and red. Famously, a very rough color combination. And it doesn't help that her legend ability is super conditional. If you deal 3 excess damage while conquering, Vi lets you ready a unit. To match that, her signature equipment lets you draw if you deal 3 excess damage as well. So that sounds pretty good, but what if they don't leave units at a battlefield? Well, as it turns out, it means that your deck doesn't function. It just generally feels like a worse Ambessa, who I'm also pretty confident isn't a good deck in her own right, at least not a great deck. On top of that, there are so many stun and bounce effects that it's just difficult to run things over in general. At the very least though, her champion options are really solid. We use the yellow Vi who has ambush and stuns when she attacks, though her original card, Vi Destructive, also makes it into the deck. She has ganking and lets you recycle any number of cards from your trash to gain that much might. Otherwise, this is just a aggro swarm deck, making use of units like Jhin, Rengar, and Kai'Sa, with the new addition of Kale and Perfect Execution. It's a fun deck, it's just awkward to make work depending on the matchup and the situation. We find an Ambessa, and that's kind of rough as, like I said, her legend is just a better version of mine, and it lets her ready her units to pull them away from battlefields so we can't do the excess damage thing. They set up a Marauder, and we play a Carrion Dredger, and Ambessa quickly conquers the battlefield for a free empower of both the unit and her legend. And then Ambessa's champion gets put into the base, and a card is hidden. So I take things a little bit slow, and I just develop a Rengar into base. They get out an Honest Broker, suggesting to me that the face-down card is a hidden blade. Then they ready the Marauder and send it to the other battlefield, but unfortunately he has the Rampage and kills my Rengar with it, though the double power cost is pretty rough for them. On my turn, I send the Dredger to the Forgotten Monument and ambush Vi to stun his unit. With 3 excess damage, I then ready Vi and pull her to safety. Ambessa conquers the battlefield back, and she uses Guttural Roar to enable public execution on my Vi, forcing me to sacrifice to refuel. But she is now tapped out, so I play the Hextech Gauntlets, set up a Noxus Hopeful, and cleave the bird to overrun her champion, drawing a card, readying the Hopeful, and moving it to the other battlefield. They Hidden Blade my unit, refilling my hand, and I pass it back, letting them hold to 6 to my 2. It is not looking great. They then throw in a Kayle and pass without empowering her, and on my turn, I drop in a Rengar and hide a Hidden Blade. Also playing another Hidden Blade to kill their Kayle, knowing that if they empower it up, a deflect 3 cost would basically end my game. So she holds to 7 and plays another Kayle, this time empowering it. Luckily, I have options now. I Hidden Blade my bird, freeing up the gauntlets and attach them to Rengar, who has ganking. He runs over and swings for 9, which is just enough to win the battlefield. But she uses a punch first to raise Kayle to 10. So I cast Tactical Retreat, saving the Rengar and killing his broker. This leaves Kayle alone, and luckily the Hidden Blade earlier drew me into a perfect execution. This gives Rengar Assault 3 and readies him, just making him big enough to kill Kayle, after which I play an unsung hero. My opponent plays an Auroch and an Emissary in their base and passes to me, and I hold to 6 and just fill my battlefield with Jinns and the hero in hopes that they can't get over it. And that seems to work. She empowers the Auroch, who gives all empowered units 2 might, and then empowers the Emissary as well. Both move into the empty battlefield, as well as using public execution to kill my Jhin, and finally, he hides a card and passes to me. Now I hold to 7 and send Rengar over. Unfortunately, the hidden card is a Kennen, and he stuns the Rengar. Now, it looks like I cheat here, and it's to my own detriment. For some reason, I just moved the Rengar back to base and didn't actually kill it, which means that the gauntlets remained on the Rengar and I couldn't put them on anyone else, which is bad because, you know, we need to conquer that battlefield. Luckily, it doesn't come in super big here, but it could have been a difference maker. I send in the Jhin, killing his Emissary, and drop a red Vi, then recycling every card in my trash except for the perfect execution, which I use to ready her, and they leave the game once they see that she is readied and big enough to overrun their field. That ends our run through Unleashed, which was almost perfect, but Ivern kinda ruined it. We finished the set with a fantastic record of 40-19. And then, as we move into Vendetta, it all goes downhill. Alright, let's talk about Unleashed. I had an almost flawless run through this set, which is kinda crazy. We got really lucky with a couple of these matchups and a couple rage quits, which is fine. It's gonna happen in this video, unfortunately. But overall, I think we did really well. A lot of big misplays on my part, though. Even if I won these games, they weren't really perfect play by any means, but overall I think we had some really cool decks. The nice part about this set is that it's just almost entirely decks that I really love to play, with a few exceptions. Obviously, I did not enjoy Ivern. I did very poorly with Ivern, but otherwise I think not bad. The Jhin was also very complicated and I had a big amount of trouble figuring that combo out. We got there, obviously, because we had access to 3 time warps. But, you know, who's keeping track? It's fine. Otherwise, though, the Poppy game felt fantastic. And I got to play some of my favorite decks just in general. With the Diana, with the Rengar I love both those decks so much. The Vex was also really, really cool. I liked that Karox deck. That said, I was on the playing side of it, not the opposing side. And I might not like it so much if I'm the one having all my units taken. So that's something to consider, maybe. The Lillia deck felt okay, a little bit clunky, as Lillia does. Definitely my least favorite version of that, like, green-blue strategy. And the Pike deck with Katarina worked really well. I was very happy with that. I've been trying to get that deck to work for a minute now, and to see it actually come out together was really great. The Vi into the Salty Ambessa. I'm never going to be upset about a Salty opponent. Can we talk about the Master Yi XP game, though? Turn 3, getting 10 experience is insane. Just free win, basically, at that point, and there's not much that you can really do to come back from it. So I had definitely undervalued the Reckoner's Arena, but it seemed to work really well in that deck. With that said, though, we can finally get into Vendetta, the brand new champions. Only 9 more legends to get through, so let's just dive into them.
Everyone dies. I just speed things up.
Starting things off with the newest set, we have Akali, the very first red and green legend. She has the ability to exhaust herself at action speed and pull one of your units back to your base from a showdown during your turn. Or you can empower her and that unit will be pulled back readied instead, and that can be crazy powerful when it comes to generating value, as any move trigger cards become unbelievably strong with this legend. Some good examples are both of her champion cards. Using the red one, Akali Deadly Weapon, she deals 1 damage to a unit at a battlefield when she moves to or from it, and if she's empowered, she gains 1 might and deals 2 damage each time instead. This shreds through decks that use many smaller units or that hide behind tanks. The other Akali, who we talked about in the Irelia deck, is in the main deck as well, and gets 2 might when she moves to a battlefield, as well as she can't be targeted outside of combat, making her extremely tricky to deal with. As for her signature spell, Shuriken Flip deals 2 damage to an enemy unit at a battlefield, and then moves a friendly unit there, similar to what we saw with Leona, Yasuo, Lucian, and Kha Zix in the past. It is move plus an effect. This card normally costs 1 and a power, but it can be cast from flow for 3 and a power later. Now, admittedly, Akali does struggle into Draven specifically, as anytime you use her legend ability against him, you are now giving him a card draw, and that's pretty rough, but other matchups should be okay overall. The rest of the deck is largely just cards that we've seen before, but I do want to mention some of the move effects in particular. Stellar Corn draws, Jhin makes an energy and a power, and Pendulum Blade gets 2 might when moving to a battlefield. So let's just put things into perspective. Let's imagine Stella has an axe on her. Move her forward, plus 2 might, and a draw. The legend ability then moves her back, you get another draw and ready her, and then you can move her forward with another plus 2 might and another draw. That is 3 guaranteed cards and 4 might before investing anything once your Akali is empowered. Every turn. So let's get into our games, and I'm going to be honest, I felt pretty confident going into this legend, but it was rough. Turn 1, the opponent uses Stack Deck into a Nocturne. Turn 2, they double Seal and Vanguard Captain, which makes a bunch of units. And while we are kind of set up, they have a lot of value on board already. This only gets made worse when Baited Hook comes out, and this ends up being a very grindy game that comes down to both of us being at 7 points. He needs to Baited Hook into an answer, and finds a Soul Gorger. That revives a Harness Dragon, and clears out my only unit. So unfortunately, Game 1 is a wash. Game 2, we match into a Nasus, and we very quickly end up with 2 Stellars and 2 Charms in hand. Our options are a bit limited, but pretty strong overall, so I set up Akali in base and move in Inferna, but a Deadly Flourish kills Akali, and he goes in to conquer the Starspring. Funnily, Inferna's 1 might makes her super hard for the cat and crab to kill, which gives us a little bit of wiggle room. So, back to me, and I choose to Falling Star their units. Yes, this is super expensive, but with the tools I have, I think clearing their board and slowing them down is going to be very important. I'm noticing that Akali is really good at conquering, but really bad at defending, so I'm going to have to work on that going forward. Regardless, he drops a Zhonya's and Bellow Breaths my Inferna, I conquer the peak with Akali, and finally set up a Stella, but a Watcher comes in to clear out Akali and take the battlefield from me. Luckily, Stella survives, and I can start drawing into answers. So I empower my legend, move in, and pull back. Then move into Starspring for a 3rd card draw, leaving up some energy for responses. He goes to bonk Stella, so I drop in Inferna, triggering the battlefield and moving Stella to safety. This gets me another card draw, and lets him play a 2nd bonk for the Inferna. But I would much rather lose her than the Stella, so I'm okay with that. From here, we pretty much repeat the last turn. Move, pull, draw, draw. This gets me into an axe that attaches to Stella, and we go in trying to kill the Watcher, dropping in a longsword to overpower him. Though the Zhonya's does save him just long enough for me to pull a Scorpion from Mortal Kombat and tell him to get back over here with a charm. My opponent tries to tell me that Watcher goes off again, which would have lowered Stella's might, and I painfully have to explain that isn't how that works, and after way too much back and forth, he goes, sometimes they let me get away with it. Which, okay, sure. Back to him, he drops a Nasus before passing, and I can use Emperor's Divide to move Stella back to base, then Starspring, triggering the legend and moving her back to the battlefield, netting 4 card draws and 4 might as a boost. We then charm the Nasus into me, he tries to defy it, but I play one as well, and the big dog is taken out. I then drop Scuttle, triggering the Starspring for itself, as well as 2 more draws, one from the bug and one from the Stella. For those keeping track, I drew a total of 7 times that turn. On his turn, he time warps, and with his extra turn, he plays a Scuttle, looking for an answer, doesn't find one, and ends the game, bringing us to a record of 41 and 19 with a win and a loss on Akali.
The Medadas do not forgive or forget.
Now, Ambessa is the deck that I have played against by far the most in this video, and it's up next. You probably know what she does by now, but she is the yellow and orange legend for this set who empowers herself whenever you empower anything else. Then she can be disempowered and exhausted to pay a power and ready a unit. it can be super powerful for some aggressive plays, as well as for protecting some of your units that you don't want to leave at a battlefield. Now, both of her champions are pretty viable, which is something I'm noticing is pretty common in this set, and it's a nice change from what we've seen in the past. Regardless, we're going to go with the orange one, which pairs really well with fight spells like Challenge and Rampage. We also have her signature spell, which lets us pick a friendly unit, then kill an enemy unit with less might. And it can be played from flow, which is pretty nice. That said, every other card we have talked about already today, so we can just get right into the games. And luckily, by this point, this set should be a lot of we've already seen these cards, we can just get to the gameplay. We're starting off into a Jayce, and we get things going pretty well here, but they promising future into an Aurora pretty early, and we have trouble keeping up. That said, super cool deck from them, using Mundo to recycle units back into the deck, and Sprite Mother to take advantage of the Elder Dragon's kill effects. If I'm gonna lose to an Aurora, it might as well be a cool one. Either way, we take the L and head into game 2 into an Akali. We go first and get out a Legion Marauder, and then rather than taking a free Empower on our own battlefield, I actually capture the Treasure Hoard here. This is a more useful battlefield for the opponent, develops us a gold, and fits into the curve that we already have available, so I think it's okay. Regardless, they take the Altar with a Crab, then drop a Stella and a Hidden card, which I'm expecting to be back off, so to avoid it, I play a Guttural Roar on my Marauder, and then Public Execution to kill the Stella, hoping to deal with it before it becomes a problem if I can dodge a Defy. It is in fact not a back off, and she flips an Emperor's Divide. I still get to kill the Stella, but she does get the draw out of it at least. That lets me take the Altar with my other Marauder, empowering it for free and passing back to them. They drop a Mask to the back row, and send their Crab in with a Discipline to trade with the Marauder. I let him take the battlefield and opt to Hidden Blade myself for the draw instead though, knowing that I can Rengar in on the following turn, making another treasure as I conquered a 5. Back to them, and a Jhin comes out as well as a Twilight Reveler, who readies units when she attacks. Other than that though, they just pass and I hold to 7. Now unfortunately for them, I'm in a spot where I can just pull my units back to base and wait, and since I don't have any defenders, the Reveler can never be an attacker. I play my Ambessa champion and a broker, and then let them conquer to 4, but they see it's already too late, and leave the game, bringing us to 42 and 20, again a win and a loss.
I fight for a brighter tomorrow.
That sets us up on Jayce, and this has been a bit of a hard one for me. Jayce is our first blue and orange legend, and as we've already seen, there are so many ways to build him, but I wanted to really lean into the actual theme of the legend, which was probably a mistake, but it was a fun mistake at the very least. Jayce has the ability to pay 1 energy and exhaust himself to ready one of your gear, but if you empower him, he readies 2 gear instead. Similarly, his signature spell readies up to 4 units, gear, or runes. So I went all in on the gear theme, Hextech formula to empower other gear, such as Tools of Empire, Questionable Tome, and Hextech Disc to give you might, card draw, and units respectively. Pit Crew readies when you play a gear, and Drop Border comes in ready if you already have 2 gear out, just like how Porobot draws you a card if you have 3 other gear out. We also have Repair Specialist, which gets Assault equal to the number of gear that you have, and on the top end, we're using Gangplank alongside a 1-mana Stupefy and Retreat to make for some easy big swings. And yeah, the deck was really fun, made some cool plays, but it kinda has a lot of puzzle pieces that you need to find to be consistent, and it does feel pretty slow. Either way, let's talk games. Game 1 is into a Jinx who opens up with Brittle Steel, kinda shutting down our whole deck and cutting any momentum that we had by destroying our disc. Throw in a Falling Star to remove the only units that we actually got for a while, and we just couldn't get back into it. Game 2, we find a Reksai. They start and conquer on their second turn, using their legend to find an Under Titan and play a free Poro to base. This is followed by an Inferna and a Noxus Hopeful. Their third turn is a Conquer with the Inferna, and they even salvage my gold for disrespect. I managed to get out a Pit Crew and a Hextech formula, and when they conquer, Reksai finds them Void Rush, which finds them a Call the Weak, and there's just no coming back at that point. Just like the Jinx game, it was a series of I play a card, they play the out, and repeat. Also, this is about the time where I become very tilted. I am so close to finishing this challenge, and every loss feels super demoralizing, especially when I'm just getting blown out like this. I was also dealing with my roof caving in from a storm at this point, so just like it was a rough day, you know? Luckily, game 3 we match into a Darius, who disconnects on the second turn, which doesn't count, so we're just extending things more, and our actual game 3's into a Kai'Sa. I open up with a Poro, and they drop a Lecturing Yordle, tapping out and allowing us to feel confident conquering without having to see a Hexray. We make a gold and drop a Tools of Empire, and they drop in and accelerate their Kai'Sa and double conquer. But this opens up the opportunity for me to play a ready drop border, empower it with the tools, and swing in for 8 to kill the Kai'Sa. I'm telling you, this deck can do some cool stuff. It's very fun when it works. Regardless, they hold up to 3 and develop a Forerunner, and back on my turn, I pull the drop border back, boost it up, ready the tools with our legend, and then boost the border again. And then I ready them with a first mate, swinging in for 12 and killing both defenders, though they are getting 2 mechs out of it. I also set up a Jayce and they Falling Star my border, but either way, he double conquers again and passes back to me after dropping a Noxus Hopeful and a Poro. Back to me, Jayce readies and gives Assault 2, I give him 4 more might with the tools, and then ready them with Jayce, and give another 4 to a Pit Crew. Jayce swings in for 11, and I conquer to 5, and as I drop a Hextech formula, the Pit Crew is readied so I can run into the Forge, bringing me to 6. I pass, and they search for a Singularity with a Stupefy, but when they don't see it, they just give me the win, giving Jayce a record of 1 win and 2 losses, and bringing me to 43 and 22.
Balance in all things.
And the hits keep rolling. Kennen is our first yellow and purple legend, with the ability to become empowered when you play a card from anywhere other than your hand. He can then be exhausted at action speed to give a unit Assault 2. His chosen unit, that we talked about way back in Leona, is the yellow Kennen, which can be hidden, and when they get played or when they attack, you can pay 2 energy to stun a unit. Also, if he's at a location with a stunned unit, he gets 2 might. It's a pretty good card. Almost as good as his signature spell, Lightning Rush. This is just stacked deck, but you trash the cards that you don't pick, and then it also has flow as well. Though this one isn't action speed, it's a bit more balanced because of that, but it's still insanely strong. All the cards in this deck we've already talked about other than Edge of Night, which I was giving yet another chance here, but in general, we're looking to hit Nocturne, fill our trash, and then play Rasa for cheap. Now, we have some fun news here, as my dumbass wasn't recording the first 3 games on this legend, losing to an Ambessa, an Irelia, and an Akali before getting into a game with Mel. We get to go first, but don't have any plays and just pass to them, and they set up an Apprentice Mage. We drop a Lightning Rush on our turn, which finds us arguably the worst options in the deck, but we take the Baron hoping that Mel will struggle to deal with it in like 12 turns when I can actually play it. Then I drop a Fizz, play my Lightning Rush again, this time finding a Nocturne which I can put into play, and a Fizz for hand. That definitely helps, but we did lose a lot of power, pushing the Baron even farther away. Mel conquers the Conservatory and empowers her unit and legend, and just passes the turn. I use my legend to give Nocturne Assault and swing him in, to which she plays a Stupefy that draws her into a Shock Blast. So we abandon that back to hand, and predict yet another Nocturne, which is pretty nice, but she can just replay the Shock Blast to trade. With that though, we conquer with Fizz and develop a Disciple. Back to Mel, who just plays a Researcher, and we hold, then conquer to 3. I try to play a Call the Weak to set them back, but they mesmerize it back to hand. At least they still have to replay it, it does slow them down either way. I play a Frog and pass the turn. The Researcher then comes back out, alongside a Student, and we might not have any runes, but we do have a little bit of tempo. From here, a bunch of disconnections keep happening, but eventually it evens out, and a stacked deck finds us another copy of itself, which finds us a Hidden Blade. I cannot find a seal to save my life this game, it's a little bit rough. Either way, we go in to conquer to 5, and finally do find a seal, as well as another Lightning Rush thanks to the Frog and Battlefield. We get another seal, and finally find a Rasa that we can put onto the board. On Mel's turn, she uses Mel to weaken Fizz, and then empowers her Researcher to empower her legend again. She then sends Fizz into the Fizz, and unfortunately, we whiff the Battlefield trigger. They set up some Tentacles and a Treasure Trove, which they crack right away before hiding a card. Back to me, and I want to avoid spending power at all costs. I run in the Nocturne, and they hit me with a Stupefy, so I offer the trade, and force the hidden card to be flipped. This banishes and replays my Nocturne, actually making them stronger, but still forcing a crash. So I just give Nocturne Assault and run them over. Then down comes a Fizz who brings back a Hidden Blade so I can draw some cards, keeping us at an even power for Baron in just 2 turns. A Lightning Rush from Flow lets us find another Nocturne, which I thought was 2 cards lower in the deck as I had mulliganed it back at the start of the turn, which kinda screws me by delaying the Baron. On their turn, Mel conquers Zon to 3 points and kills Nocturne with the help of his legend, though the Conservatory draws me into an Abandon, at which point I realized I could lose to a double Time Warp. Luckily, they don't have it, and another researcher comes down. At this point, I am at 7, but seriously am concerned about decking out. But knowing I have a last rites in the last 2 cards of my deck is kind of relieving. Fizz goes in to objectively the wrong battlefield, giving Mel the chance to find a spell, and luckily, we are never punished, and a pack of wonders gets recycled instead. They then play a Star-Crossed, and I play Abandon, forcing it back to their hand just to get rebuttaled. So Fizz goes back to my hand alongside their researcher in base, and I run the Frog into Zon, cycling a card for both moving and for the battlefield on Conquer, bringing us to the last card in our deck after the Conquer at 7 draw, which turns out to be Last Rites. So I play it so that I can recycle and send Nocturne in for game. This was absolutely brutal, but we did get there, bringing us to a new record of 44-25.
Perhaps it's time for the era of the arcane.
Fun fact, Kennen is my least favorite deck to play against and to play as, so I need something fun, and luckily, at the halfway point of this set, we have Mel. This is Vendetta's blue and purple legend who becomes empowered whenever you empower anything else. Then you can also disempower her to exhaust her and give a unit -2 might for the rest of the turn. Her chosen champion is going to be Mel, newly awakened, who draws a card when she enters, and once empowered, makes your minus effects 1 stronger, and makes it so that your opponent can't counter your spells or abilities. And finally, her signature spell, Rebuttal, is a Defy with no power limit. It also lets you steal a spell's effect to use it for yourself if you want to pay a power. And that can be extremely strong depending on what you hit. This deck makes use of a lot of cards we've seen, but works towards playing Swain as a win condition. Swain has vision, and if you've played a non-token unit, a non-token gear, and a spell during your turn, he conquers for 2 points. And hey, Porobot is a unit and a gear, so Porobot and any spell like Ride the Wind enables him for a bunch of points. Mel runs into Kennen, and we start off with a Poro, while they use Lightning Rush, a Seal, and immediately Call the Weak, which is a bold choice, so on my turn I just set up a questionable tome and empower it and my legend before dropping the list. I call Demacia as I'm expecting him to be on a baited hook list. However, he drops a Bewitching Spirit and ruins my entire day. So I play a pack of wonders and a treasure trove to ramp and then draw, and then play a Hextech formula to guarantee I can use the tome every turn and draw a card, hopefully getting over any Bewitching Sprite loops. And I'm off to a great start as I forget to use it that turn. Back to them and another Lightning Rush before they go into Conquer. Importantly, both battlefields suck for them, with Sigil making them recycle a rune and Fortress dealing 1 damage at the start of their turn, which marks them for damage that my Mel can then kill them with. They play a Spectral Matron, calling back a Vanguard Captain, who refills their board with a bunch of idiots. On my turn, Fizz uses Wages of Pain, killing his sprite and netting me a gold, and then I draw with the book and with the Treasure Trove combo before re-empowering the book and playing the Trove again. We want to conserve the Porobot for Swain and need fodder to discard if he plays another sprite, so we're trying to keep all that in mind. They conquer, then play Fizz to replay a Star-Crossed, but Rebuttal shuts that down. They then conquer the Sigil and play another Vanguard, bringing them to about 1 million units on their field. Our Mel champion comes out, and we use our legend to kill his matron. We then bounce the list and weaken their captain, letting Fizz run in to take the battlefield. We draw with the book and re-empower it and my legend before passing back to them. On Kennen's turn, he gives a Recruit Assault 2 and sends it at Fizz, but a Stupefy keeps him alive. He then uses another Lightning Rush and sends both of his units at Fizz to take the battlefield back and conquers to 4. He tries to call the weak, but I once again drop a Rebuttal to keep Mel alive. However, a Fizz makes it happen anyways. So I draw with my Trove combo, play a Porobot to draw, and then another Poro, and I weaken his units with the list as I ride the wind the Plundering Poro into it. Finally, I pull the Poro back and set up another pack of wonders. Speaking of which, he finally sets up his own pack of wonders combo and loops it before passing back to me. I conquer to 4 and stack deck into Swain. I throw him out, draw with the book, and pass. I should have bounced the Porobot, but I am dumb and bad, and I get immediately punished as he drops a Ruination and we are back to square one. On my turn, I draw a bit with the Tome and the Trove twice, finding 2 more Poros and digging for another Swain. They then play a Bewitching Spirit, but I have like 50 cards in hand, so that's fine. Following that, another Spectral Mother comes out and they return a Vanguard Captain before bouncing the Matron back to hand. They then try to stack deck, so I use Rebuttal and steal the effect, finding my Swain, but losing my last Ride the Wind. On my turn, I conquer, then weaken his captain with the list and play Bellows Breath repeated to clear out his units. I go to 6, then loop some draws, and even get another set of Formula and Tome out to try and get back to the Ride the Wind. And again, I leave the Porobot out because I just don't learn. Luckily, he uses Kennen to conquer the other side with a Recruit, and a Stupefy makes us trade. Matron comes out again, bringing back the Fizz to call the weak and kill my Porobot, as we are always punished. Regardless, I play Swain, then the list, and finally Fizz brings back Ride the Wind, completing all 3 requirements and conquering for 2 points as we win the game, bringing us to a new total of 45 and 25.
The cycle of life and death continues. We will live, they will die.
With that, we are at best boy of the new set, Nasus, a green and blue legend who lets you ready 2 runes whenever you play a unit, gear, or ability that costs 7 energy or more. His chosen champion has Deflect 2 and can be empowered for 8 to score an extra point when he conquers, and his signature spell deals 4 damage, or 7 if you have 7 runes, and then you get to channel a rune if it kills a target. Now, most of the deck we have seen before, but there are a few cards that we have to talk about. Frostcoat Mother and Grumpy Rockbear can each be empowered for 12 energy, but get a discount equal to how many runes you have. So they can be used to trigger the Nasus legend very, very easily. Tasty Feyfolk can be accelerated, and when it dies, you channel 2 and draw 1, and I think that's actually it. Everything else we've already seen before. We match into a Rumble, whose name I have to censor because it's anti-Semitic and shitty, and we quickly conquer in with a Scuttle Crab, baiting them to move towards the Void Gate so that I can use Wages of Pain and kill his units, which happens here. They play a Gem Jammer to base and eclipse my Scuttle Crab for Predict trigger, which is a choice, but, you know, racists are pretty dumb. Unfortunately, my turn is kind of a bust, so we pass back, and they conquer their tree before trying to make a mech and drawing a card with Iterative Design. We stopped that from happening, but he still gets to play it for its flow cost, but at least we cut the problem in half. Also, I'd locked myself out of playing Nasus here because I'm dumb and bad, so on my turn I just pull the crab back and cane his mech to channel a rune before passing back to him. A Forerunner and a Poro come out as a card is hidden and we are back to me. I just get Nasus out, untap 2, and drop another crab before reconquering to 4. He gets Blue Rumble on board and takes the Void Gate, conquering to 4 as well, and I get to look at his hand and hidden card being Kai'Sa and a Wages of Pain. Back to me, I empower Nasus and now use the cane to kill the Forerunner. With that, even when considering the Wages of Pain, I can run over his battlefield and double score. I hide back off and pass back to them. Rumble sends in both mech tokens for an even trade and then even drops a Smite on the Nasus. Luckily, a back off means that we still live, but unluckily he refuses to pay the deflect cost, but I know I'm gonna win, so I don't even argue at this point. He passes back to me after playing a Kai'Sa and I hold to 7. I then play a pair of Twilight Shrouds on Scuttle, then play them both from Flow, and use Discipline to get over his Poro 4 game, bringing us to 46 and 25.
As I live, all will die.
Now mirroring Nasus, we have Renekton. He is a red and orange legend who allows you to pay 2 power to make 2 energy, though you can only use that on units or their abilities. And while that's not the strongest ability that we have access to in the new set, this does let you do some wild stuff. His chosen champion, Renekton, Rage Fueled, can be accelerated and deals 2 damage to all enemies at a battlefield if you have 4 or less runes when he attacks. This can be great for killing a bunch of small units at a time, and if they have Void Gate out, I mean, it's even more, right? As for his signature spell, Dominus, at action speed you can double a unit's might and give them the ability to be readied this turn by paying 2 power. Now this deck is heavily designed to abuse your first turn. Basically, on turn 1, Renekton gives you access to 4 energy, so we can play Kai'Sa, Noxus Hopeful, or Oasis Rider right away. Oasis Rider, by the way, gains 2 might and ganking on your turn if you have less runes than your opponent, which you should. Or if you're going second, you can also play Rengar or Qiyana on your first turn. Otherwise, we have access to Irresistible Feyfolk, Nidalee, Gem Jammer, and Inferna. Like I said, this is all aggro. In spell-heavy matchups, we can also swap in the Ruin Runner, which is a very strong turn 2 play. Now we once again queue into a Kennen, and they go crazy on their opening, playing 2 Seals and a Soaring Scout. And then I see their name. Listen, I'm a million hours in at this point. You're gonna have to let me bully new players a little bit. For real though, we talked a lot through this game. I helped whenever I could, and they seem super chill. Hope you're doing well. Regardless, since we're going second, I can use Renekton to accelerate in a Kai'Sa at a battlefield and then steal a free draw. I pass to them, and they conquer the Void Gate and then hide a card there. I hold to 2 and play an Inferna, conserving some energy so that we can play a Ruin Runner next turn. He plays another Seal and a Karthus and then passes back to me. So I send Inferna in to take the battlefield, and they Hidden Blade their bird for 2 draws and to channel 2 runes. Kai'Sa goes in to conquer the other battlefield for a draw of my own, and I get the Ruin Runner out with Renekton's ability. Another Karthus comes down, but I don't really know what Kennen does to a Ruin Runner, so I'm not all that worried. Another Seal comes down as well, and the Kennen champion, bringing him to a total of 4 Seals in 3 turns, by the way. I hold the 6 and pull my units back, saving energy for a Rengar, and then I see his trash, and it is a Glowstone deck, which is rad as hell, and definitely makes playing Rengar even more difficult. Regardless, he plays and equips a Last Rite, conquering and bringing back a Kog'Maw. I love his deck so much. When he passes to me, Inferna goes in to kill Kog'Maw, who kills Kennen for me, and then I just double conquer to 8. I honestly want to build that Kennen deck, but either way, we're going to 47 and 25 now.
A demonstration of superior judgment.
With that, we have reached our penultimate champion of the video, Shen. Shen is in the yellow and green domains and has an action speed ability to exhaust himself and give a unit tank, which I think is deceptively powerful for how simple it is. You can really dictate almost any combat because of this ability, and I think that's really, really strong. His chosen champion is Shen Kinku, who can be played at reaction speed and has shield 2 and tank. And his signature spell, Shadow Dash, is basically a charm that can only pull units to a place that you have units. However, if you have exactly 2 units there, they both get 1 might. This also has a flow cost, which can be pretty powerful as it kind of means you always have a charm on hand. Now, I would admittedly play this deck very differently. The Shen deck I've built in real life has gone through a lot of iterations since this video was recorded, but regardless, this is what I'm working with for now. We have seen every other card in this list, and are basically just trying to capitalize on using tank to protect units like Mournful Witness, Affectionate Poro, Stellar Cornherder, and Sona. And when tank isn't enough, we have plenty of counters and stuns. That said, yellow and green tend to struggle with actually doing things. They are fantastic supplementary colors, but together can often feel very, very limited. There's no real direct removal and only Ruination as a board wipe option, which is not what you want to do in a board-based strategy either way. Regardless, let's just get into our games. Our first game is into a Kennen and was a token-based strategy around Renata and Tentacles. One big trade leaves us pretty far behind, and ultimately, he takes the game as we don't really have any comeback mechanics. Game 2 is into a Vex, who goes first, conquers the Grove of the God Willow, and it's just impossible to get it off of her. There's not much to say. If you've played into a Vex who gets onto this battlefield, you know how rough this can be if you fall behind. Game 3 brings us to a mirror match with another Shen. We are the first ones to get on board this time, and we are the ones to set up on the Grove with our Affectionate Poro. We drop in Shen to defend him, use Shadow Dash to charm in his units, and get a free draw with the Poro. On their turn, they drop a green Shen to base, passing back and letting us get a Grove draw as well, as we hold to 2. We play a Mournful Witness and a Scuttle, and charm in his Shen. This would trade both of our Shens, but leaves me with an Empowered Witness, and yet another card draw from Poro. And seeing this, they choose to leave, and we finally take a game, bringing us up to 48 and 27 as we go into our last legend. Yes, this was a fast game, but that's what these whole decks do, right? You either get ahead right away and they can't take it back, or you just fall behind.
The unseen blade is the deadliest.
Our final legend for this video is Zed, Vendetta's red and purple legend. Alongside Kennen, this is my least favorite of the set, and probably in general. When you banish one of your cards, he gets empowered and can spend that and exhaust himself to discard a card and draw. This is pretty powerful if your hand is empty, but also just in general for setting up your trash and for consistency. His chosen champion is going to be Zed without a sound. When you conquer, you can make a shadow clone in base, and at action speed, you can pay an energy and a power to swap his location with one of his clones. And that's kinda cool. Finally, his signature spell is Deathmark, which has you burn 3 and makes you a shadow clone. However, it can be played from flow as well, banishing itself and empowering your legend. The game plan is a familiar one. Fill the trash as quickly as you can and get Rasa out. And we also have an eventual finisher of Vi. We want to reuse powerful spells and overwhelm the opponent as quickly as possible, but spoilers, this is by far my worst performance of the video. And knowing how close I am to finishing the challenge makes me super frustrated as these games are brutal. I can literally see the light at the end of the tunnel, but I cannot get there. So game 1, we are into a Reksai, and man, this is one of the worst games I've ever played. I start with a treasure hunter and go for an early conquer, while they set up a manufacture and a recruit. On their turn, they conquer and trigger Reksai and find an Under Titan for 2 free energy. With that, they use a Falling Star to kill my units, and follows up with a Noxus Hopeful and a Carrion Dredger. All I can really do on my turn is play a Zed before passing back. They conquer again, and this time they find a Call the Weak, killing my Zed immediately in exchange for his recruit. I play an Alawi and try and slow him down with a Decree of Discord, and this man drops a Vengeance to kill Alawi. Who plays Vengeance? Tell me, right now. Regardless, the whole game goes like this. It's just constant removal for every unit I play, and there's no coming back from it. Game 2 is into a Vex, who ends up playing a Spider deck and manages to pull off a Grand Plaza win against me by hitting a Flurry of Blades to make 4 birds, which is super embarrassing. Game 3 is a Sivir. I side expecting an Aurora, and it ends up being a mid-range list based on using Ezreal to cheapen Rampage and get some easy fight spells. Ultimately, this ends in her empowering a Karox and milling and resummoning my Baron with it. Super cool. Game 4 is into Kennen, and I am fully spiraling at this point. I am exhausted, and by turn 3 I've already managed to make like 4 misplays. He gets developed onto my minefield early and fills his trash with a Shadow Disciple, and then plays a Last Rites to base. I play my own Kennen, and burn my Baron and Decree. I conquer up with a Tentacle to fix my draws with a Candlelit Sanctum, and then pass back to them. This lets him Spectral Matron into a Fizz, into a stack deck, and then he gets his chosen champion out and sends it back to me. So, I slow things down and develop an Alawi, who is doing okay with 5 tentacles out. On their turn, they set up another seal and move their Disciple to burn a card, letting them play Rasa for just 1 energy, before putting Last Rites onto Fizz and conquering the Sanctum. And this finds them not 1, but 2 Nocturnes. And like you can see my face, I am dying at this point. On my turn, I play 2 Up from the Deeps from my trash, making 4 tentacles and bringing Alawi up to 13, which I think my opponent miscounts as 15 because he leaves the game here. I can only assume that he had run out of resources with that battlefield, but I don't really know. Either way, this gives us game, and I am 100% going to take this win at that point. And it brings our final score to 49 wins and 30 losses. And that wraps things up for the Vendetta Legends and all of the decks we can play right now. That is 49 decks. I will put the exact amount of time that it took me to actually play these games on screen now, but it was over the events of like a week and a half, somewhere in there. My dumbass wanted to do this as a in one sitting thing. Do you know how bad that would have been? I am so tired. So of the 49 champions, it took me however many hours and minutes, and then 79 games, which comes down to a win rate of about 62%, which honestly, pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that overall. Unleashed was probably my favorite section. There's a lot of decks I really like there. Spirit Forge was a close second, and Origins had a ton of classic decks that I really liked as well. But there were a few standout bad ones that I can't play. I'm bad at them, and it was miserable. In particular, the Vendetta decks, I had a brutal time getting to. Zed was by far the most rough. I was getting very tilted by the end. It was just like, if I play a card, they always had the answer, which wasn't great. It's also conservatively a million degrees in this office, which has not been great, and it didn't add to me getting tilted. It was just like, if I just win a game, I can stop, and I can cool down, and it'll be great. But I couldn't. Yeah, a little bit of a crash out towards the end, but overall, I think this was a really cool experiment, forcing myself to sit down and build every deck in the game. Some of them were pretty fun, obviously, and not meant to be competitive or anything like that. The Jinx one, for example, we lost a lot because I tried to be silly with it. I'm okay with that. I'm okay doing something stupid for fun. In cases like the Zed, where it just felt like I couldn't do anything, and where I was trying to build an okay deck, that is a little bit more frustrating, but it's fine. So as I've been going, I've been trying to keep tabs of champions that I really didn't enjoy playing, as well as ones that I really liked, or that surprised me with how much fun I had with them. So as for the ones I disliked, a couple of the new set, unfortunately. Akali, Zed, and Kennen do not flow with me, ironically, at all. Like, I couldn't figure it out. The Akali, I feel like I'm going to put the effort in because I like that mechanically. I think it fits a lot like the Irelia and the Diana decks, which are two of my favorites. So, like, I feel like once I understand and can play the deck better, it'll be better. Or maybe, like, once I have a more defined deck, right? So, I didn't enjoy it, but I have hope for that, if that makes sense. Outside of that, looking at the older decks, Azir, Rumble, Ivern, and that's it. Just Azir, Rumble, and Ivern were the only three I super wasn't having a great time with. The Azir deck, I don't know. It just, again, it doesn't click. The Ivern, I just feel like is a bit too inconsistent or a bit too weak as opposed to like other decks. And Rumble, I feel like, is in the same spot. Rumble, again, I did do a bit of a goofy deck with, so that could be on me. But I don't know. It's not there for what I like to do, unfortunately. What I did like, though, obviously my top 3 decks of all time so far are Irelia, Diana, and Rengar. Playing through them again, what a blast. I actively went back to like trying to play them more between games, which is crazy when I played 80 games of Riftbound in the last few days, right? But like, that's obvious. Those are decks that I love already. I wanted to see new decks or things I haven't tried around too much that I wanted to dive more into. And for that, we had Renekton and Nasus from the new set. Those were a blast to play through. Renekton was surprisingly powerful. I didn't think it would be. Same with Nasus. You can do quite a lot with those decks, and I want to definitely test them out more. As for the older decks, the Spider version of Vex was very fun. The Pike list focused on Katarina I thought was really cool. I'm glad we got to pull that off. Ornn was great with the new helm of whatever thing that makes their cards cost more. That felt really good. The Master Yi XP thing, where I got like the Reckoner's Arena and just boom, 10 XP on one turn. Crazy. I didn't know the deck could do that, but like that was, I was on a high. Outside of that, we had Draven and Fiora. Draven is a deck that I didn't really play when it first came out, and like going back, that was a ton of fun. The Fiora deck, I didn't do super well with in this video, but it was really enjoyable all the same. So I want to go back and play around with Fiora more, especially with that new gear, the Tools of Empire, or Tool of Empire, whatever it is. I think that's going to be a really cool card in that deck. But there you have it. A gajillion hours of gameplay, 80 matches that we went through over about a week. And with that, I have managed to win Riftbound, or at least one game on every legend. Let me know your thoughts on this video. If you want to see another one when the next set comes out, please don't make me do that. And maybe I'll stream it. That could be like a fun thing to do live with all of you, and maybe get some commentary on the decks to potentially give me a better shot at some decks like Zed, right? So yeah, maybe streaming it could be fun. Let me know if you want me to stream Riftbound in general on the channel. That also could be interesting. It's not something I do too much, but we'll see. Outside of that, let me know if you try this challenge. It takes time, so like put aside a week. Let me know how many games you think it would take you to win one game on every legend that we have, if you think I did a good job or a terrible job, and any other ideas for challenges that I can do on this channel regarding Riftbound. With that all being said, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.